Hello again, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here on a beautiful spring day, perhaps a spring evening, depending on where you are in the continental United States or around the world. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and of course the man who'll be answering your questions, which are sent many different ways and at times over and over and over again. The leader of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
What a wonderful introduction, Brian. You've outdone yourself today. You're right. It's a beautiful spring day. The birds are twinkling. The sun is shining. The cumulus clouds are just kind of wafting over just enough to make it picturesque. The Monroe brothers, Alf and Ralph, out working in the yard. It's a wonderful day. And you can tell normally in this situation, I am already somewhat cranked up, but in this case, nobody's pissed me off. Because I've already had my mental breakdown for the weekend, and now I've just resigned myself to things, so I'm much calmer now. So it'll be a very pleasant show today.
I'm a little surprised based on everything that's been happening in the business of Jim Cornette. I thought you'd be a little overwhelmed and a little anxious and fired up. But you seem
that's because I've already had my breakdown now, and I'm just resigned to it. It's like I'm slowly trudging toward the edge of the cliff. No, we want to thank everybody. I gave you a kind of a prelude of what was going to happen on the what is this show? On the Experience that came out this weekend. We have temporarily suspended sales again at JimCornette.com. Because I'm in the soup. Now, Hotchkiss did his job. We didn't blow the website up. We had plenty of didn't even need to get into the box of extra server that I had in the garage. But I've been blown up. In, what was it? Friday said under 72 hours. The response to the action figures and as a result, everything else that we were selling was overwhelming to say the least, and we suspended sales because not only, since as I mentioned, the inventory feature of the site was blown up a while back, so we have to do these things manually. We got to count everything, but also I'm at the point now where it's going to take legitimately a month for me to get everybody everything they've ordered so far. So instead of being a greedy prick and making people wait for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've just taken everything down because we can't sell anymore. There was almost 1,500 individual orders. A lot of people ordered the 2-packs of the figures. That means multiple figures. We've got to count this. We probably will have a few figures left, especially I think maybe we'll have a few more of the variants, but I'm not sure because we haven't gone through all this yet. But we haven't sold out of anything that we can never get back again. So don't be depressed. Those of you who missed out, you're going to get another chance at this briefly in about a month. But I can't screw the people that have already got in and got their orders in. And right now, as I said, it's going to take, because I'm signing each and every one of these things, Brian. Do the math. I tweeted out a picture of what the fulfillment center, a.k.a. my garage, looks like. Last night, it got like 2,000 likes on that of me in front of a wall of these boxes, and they're shipping more. That's not all the figures. I don't have them all in-house yet. They're still shipping in a number of shipments. But I talk to you, Brian, more than probably almost any human being on earth these days. I talked to Harley Quinn a little bit more than you, but that's why I put the qualifier in. And you know how much I stress over fulfilling things in a prompt and quality fashion. I'm always, I got to get orders done, or I got to get these. People are going to be upset. I feel like I've made a deal with these people. It's a transaction. They've sent me their money, and I've got to hold my end of the bargain up and send them their quality merchandise. So I stress over this quite a bit, do I not?
You do.
You do? Because that's all I'm ever... Can we finish this show so I can get back to orders? But anyway, I want to make sure everybody gets there. So point is, if you ordered stuff before the figures went on sale on Friday the 26th, then almost everything's in the mail. We're waiting on some t-shirts, and we got a few more international orders to send out. But that'll be done this week. If you were amongst those who got in the 72-hour frenzy over the weekend, we got everything. We're processing everything. Those figures are going to start shipping on Monday, which is, I'm sorry, not Monday. They should start shipping by Saturday. But if not, on Monday, which is what? No, goddamn, that's Stacy's back surgery. That's another thing that's coming up. So they're going to start shipping the first of next week. And they will continue shipping every possible day until I've fulfilled all those orders. And I'm because we do these shows 2 days a week, and I've tried to get out of it. And you sternly remind me that we have all these sponsor commitments and things that we can't just frivolously toss away. And I've suspended cameos until we get the orders finished. And I do nothing else with my life. So figure 5 days a week, 100 orders a day. Is that possible? It's going to take a few weeks. So that's where we're at, folks. But don't worry, you're going to get your stuff. Just have a little patience. Don't nobody get jumpy.
Why haven't Figures Toy Company given you stock yet? I mean, no one's moving units like you are.
Well, we don't know that. I don't pry into their business. They do a variety of things, not just wrestling. I assume I am their number one wrestling seller, but they're a diversified organization.
You must make more per unit than any wrestler does on royalties for action figures because you actually sell them yourself. You're the dealer as well as the star.
Are you working for the federal government?
No, I'm thinking about it.
Well, shut your fucking pie hole.
All the AEW guys have their action figures out there in the stores, and they're making, pennies on the dollar. Meanwhile, the Jim Cornette action figure, you're doing quite well with.
What I learned a long time ago when I was just a young whippersnapper, I learned from none other than the greatest salesman of all time, Pat Buttram, a.k.a. Mr. Haney. Keep your costs and your overhead low and go for volume and sell fine quality merchandise.
That'd be a good book for you to write. Things I learned watching TV.
Yes. My whole life has been preparation to be, some type of celebrity. But maybe, and this is the rib now at this point in my life. Why the fuck am I suddenly more over than I was when I was actually in the business and making more money? I don't know. Anyway, it's your show.
It is my show, and we have questions. Like I said, some of these have been sent in a number of times. Just a little bit of suggestion, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a newer listener or someone who has decided now's the time you're going to send in a question, first of all, of course, put the subject of the question in the subject line, not your name, not Jim's name, not my name, not question, but the actual subject of the question. That helps us out, but also...
Well, give us an example of a finely worded subject line in your eyes, in your opinion, that would catch your eye and cause you to ask that question here in front of God and everybody.
I got several in front of me on the email page here. Here's one we're not going to ask on the show because we just answered it on the experience, but a email from, let me click on it just in case this guy has an alias, Stuart, and the subject line is, Peacock editing out content they deem offensive. I know what the question is.
I can see where then you would know the subject of the question.
Here's another one. This was sent by Mike Wilson. The subject, 20 years without WCW. I have an idea where that is and where that's going, that question. And then here's one. This one was sent in. I won't even give this person's name because it's not in the body of the email, just in the actual name of the person who sent it. But the question is, or the subject line is, question for Jim. That doesn't help me in any way. That doesn't help me at all in any way. Here's another one. This one was sent, again, he didn't put his name. The ones who send it like this don't put their names in the email. The subject line, question. No clue at all. Not even question for Jim. Just question. Listen, if you sent it to the drive-thru email, I figure it's a question.
You know what? But no, here's the thing. That's easy. Just write back, answer.
Here's one. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Tony in Dundalk, Ireland. The subject line, question for James. A little more proper there. But again, I have no idea what that is.
It was more polite, though. It wasn't quite as dismissive. It just question.
Now, here's a way you can do it. This was sent from your fan in Ontario, Brady. The subject line, question about Chris Irvine. That's a way of doing it where you incorporate the word question and also the subject that the question is about. Any thoughts about any of this, Jim? All right, it appears Jim has gone silent to leave me hanging in the wind here on the show.
Well, I was just thinking that now that we've completely offended and browbeaten most of our listeners, called them dumb fucks and run them off, why don't we start the program?
Well, what I was going to say, where I was going before you asked for examples, is...
I had to ask, didn't I?
This is all your fault. What a great episode this has been so far. And you are our friends.
Friends. Our illiterate, annoying, pesty friends.
What I was going to say is, if you are someone new to the show or new to sending in questions, it does help at times to go through the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel or even the archive of older clips on the Arcadian Vanguard channel just to see if the exact question you're asking, like, I don't know, what was it like traveling with Yokozuna? Has it been asked multiple times already?
And has been covered in an extensive, lengthy, and detailed fashion, and said clip available on YouTube for all to see.
That's right. So someone will send in something, hey, how come you haven't read my question? And I don't respond, but I'm thinking, because it's been asked 6 times in the last 4 years. That's why. So that's my point. Go through the archive. And again, thank you to everyone on the topic of the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. We put up a video the other day of you celebrating the plaque that you received from the fine people at YouTube. And with that, we went flying over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube now.
Well, yeah, and it took them that long to send us our 100,000 subscriber award, and still no cake. A lot of people are up in arms that YouTube does not send out celebratory cakes. I'm just saying. So, but anyway, but we do thank everyone. Yes, we flew past. It was like 198,000 and change when I made the video, and we flew past it. That's not really flying to 203,000 or whatever. That's just jump. We've been doing leaps and jumps and bounds and things like that.
That's right.
Faster than a leaping YouTube channel, more powerful than a mighty podcast, able to leap tall dwarf dong suckers in a single bound.
You
Look,
stop it.
Up in the sky.
Cut it out before Peacock censors you.
Oh, the cock. The cock is censor. You know, as a matter of fact, I think that we should officially nominate the Peacock channel to be the new whipping boy for the wrestling fans now, since they're obviously just rushing this thing. Everybody's saying, we read that thing, and we have Dave Shearer answered some other questions we'll probably talk about today on the program on one of his columns, but Shearer wrote that thing a week or two ago about how the functionality of the Peacock, it's not made to watch wrestling or probably even sports or whatever. No live pausing and rewinding and all that shit. It's just like if you want to watch old episodes of fucking Friends or whatever, right? So why did they not fix this before and rush into it is what I'm asking. If they've absorbed this giant network of everything that seemed to be working the way people wanted it to work, then why have they just said, oh, we're going to take it and none of this stuff works that way over here?
I think because they wanted WrestleMania. They wanted that to be the kickoff.
Is this going to be the last one ever?
The last WrestleMania?
As Mama Cornette used to say when I was antsy about getting a cheeseburger. Is this the last one ever? Can't you just wait for? Couldn't they have done it next year and done it right, where everybody'd like it instead of pissing everybody? This is the same thing Ring of Honor did, but on a much bigger scale, where the fucking internet pay-per-view fiascos that doomed them in that business, because they kept doing shit they weren't ready for, or they wouldn't get ready because they wouldn't get away from Go Fight Live. But that's another story. But point is, on a more massive scale.
Go Fight Live.
Yeah, go fuck yourself. I still wish I'd have fucking taken my shoe off and just hit that guy over the head that night in Florida. He fumbled around behind the goddamn monitor and all the shit they had plugged in and stepped on the $8.99 power strip from Lowe's and knocked us off the air WrestleMania weekend. But that's what I'm saying is they couldn't have taken the time to say, hey, we're going to get all this stuff transferred over and it all works like all the wrestling fans would want it to work. Because I know Peacock already had a big giant business, but it's a million people, right, or more that were subscribers to the network. Me being one of them.
It is a relatively new business, too. It's not like Peacock's been established for years. It's relatively new. And now because they're desperate, in a good way, they're desperate for subscribers. Their thought was, we'll take this WWE content, and now we have embedded all these subscribers. But it's a horrible website to try to use. You go on there and try to find some footage. The search function sucks. Finding things sucks. And then there's stuff that's gone. I thought the network was up until the 6th. I went there looking for something the other day, and it shot me to Peacock, and the thing I was looking for isn't even on Peacock. Because the territories aren't a priority to Peacock, and I understand why. But maybe the deal should have been all current WWE product and big pay-per-view events, and keep something there for old NWA stuff and WCW stuff and the Mid-Souths and the Mid-Atlantics and World Class, because these things are going to just be lost.
In the translation.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, see, there we go. See, another reason to be pissed off at big corporations. They give us a little taste of being able to go back and easily watch instead of popping our old VHSs in. And for the young folks out there that didn't record this when it was live, they can't see it at all, but they get us used to being able to easily access this, and then they pull it, and then who knows whether it'll ever pop back up again or not. I say fuck them and feed them fish heads.
Yeah, and the crazy part, too, is the WWE Network had its faults, but they actually kind of got it right in terms of the ability to find things and just quickly and easily go through a show. And now all that functionality's gone. Just gone.
So anyway, that's why I'm saying for 1 million subscribers, instead of pissing them all off at the start, shouldn't they have waited till they could just do the same thing at the Cock as they could at the other place?
Well, here's the big question. Are they going to be able to handle WrestleMania Live 2 nights? Will there be any problems? Because if that happens, it's a catastrophe.
Hey, WrestleMania weekend in Florida. Goddamn it. I would say it was 10 years ago, but that would be perfect, but it's not. It was 9 years ago. That's when Ring of Honor went off the air, an unrelated incidents both days. Let's see what the fuck happens to the Cock in WrestleMania in Florida 9 years later. All right, this is your show.
It is. You said that there was another Dave Shearer column that you had a question from.
Well, if you want to just bring that up right now, I'll be happy to share that with everybody. No, actually, it was one of his question and answer columns on the pwinsider.com website. I'll give that plug. That basically the question was, why are AEW fans so sensitive and indifferent to any criticism? And obviously, we've been talking about this. And Dave goes into some details about, for example, how after the Shaq and Cody match, where they did the big number here several weeks ago, by the following week, 200,000 of them picked, I won't come back. And they keep saying, well, we're beating NXT, WWE's developmental brand. Well, if he makes the point, if AEW Dark Elevation only lost to Raw by 50,000 viewers, do you think the WWE would be saying, we beat them? No, it's ridiculous. But he brings up a good point. Hold on, and I'm trying to find it because I'm reading this off the screen. The reason why that some of these people are so defensive, the AEW fans, that, and we understand that, yes, they love and support wrestling, blah, 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 but why they not only can't see what's in front of them, but also why they get so fucking wound up and get their panties in a wad when you point out what's in front of them. He says fan is short for fanatic. When some people like something a lot, they lose their ability to be fair and impartial. They love it, so it's the best thing ever. Also, for a lot of wrestling fans and some reporters, AEW is exactly what they have always said that the business has needed to knock off WWE and bring in a better version of wrestling. They feel that if the masses were to see that vision, it would bring Vince McMahon to his knees. AEW does all of the things that those fans want, like blood, inside lingo, shots at WWE. So if AEW can't knock off WWE, that means that what those people have always believed would change the business was wrong. It would mean that what they believe wrestling should be can't even attract half the audience that Raw does, and only about half of that in the coveted demo. It means Vince McMahon was more right than they are, and they will fight that to the bitter end. They don't want to admit they were wrong, and what they like has a place at the table, but doesn't attract the masses the way that Vince does. That's a hard pill for them to swallow because it blows the theory that they have had for years, but has never been put to the test until now. And there's a little bit more, but I will throw in a comment. Vince won the war against a better wrestling product in the 80s because he had a better business and a better vision, and he was a better businessman. He persevered through the war in the 90s, even though sometimes he might have had the better wrestling, but sometimes he didn't with that era because WCW was all over the page. Because he was a better businessman, he had a better run business, and he persevered because he had a vision, and he didn't fucking, he changed it, but he still didn't goddamn freak the fuck out. We made this point on one of the shows last week that when we talked about Vince congratulating Big Show, that Vince has not even freaked out about this. This has not even been a war to him. He threw a little stumbling block in their path with NXT just to fuck with them a little bit, but now he's realized that they're not even fighting this anymore because it is what it is. And that's the point of this column, is that they are limiting themselves in AEW to the people that are already going to like this stuff anyway, and that's not enough to shake Vince. So he continues on. It's always a good thing to have more viewers instead of less. Do they need those new viewers now? As long as TNT is happy? No, they don't. If we get to the point where TNT isn't happy, then that's another issue. But he mentioned, and he had given some details as well earlier, if you compare year to year, AEW has less viewers every month in 2021 versus 2020. The loss, it's about 10% a year of the erosion of the viewership. We went through those numbers. Erosion is never the preferred direction any TV show wants. But anyone who doesn't think that the company needs new viewers to replace them isn't someone anyone should take seriously. So basically, in summation, he writes, there are some people in my position that love AEW and heap effusive praise on it. Then there are people like Jim Cornette, thank you, Dave, and to a lesser degree myself, who don't like a lot of things about the product and offer our criticism for Tony Khan's consideration. He's a billionaire and doesn't have to listen to us. But as a businessman, what would you do? Continually seek the adoration of people who already love what you're doing while your viewership is falling? Or would you listen to respected people when they point out things that they think you are doing wrong and back those opinions with solid, valid reasoning? And he says, I would do the latter. The fans you mentioned in the question, they would not. So that's the thing. the points that we are making to these people that for whatever reason that they just can't figure out is that we have not been against an alternative to the WWF for all the reasons that we've mentioned. From the current wrestling product to owning all of wrestling history. Somebody needs to be out there doing something else. And it would have been wonderful if this was it. But the problem was this isn't it, even though people wanted it to be it. And it isn't going to be it. Because it's some amateur hour bullshit that appeals to a small amount of people to the point where Vince created a broadcast version of his number 3 TV show to put against it just to see, and has now quit fighting that fucking war. Because that's where their numbers are, because you're only going to watch nonsensical wrestling with no continuity and subpar talent across the board, in underneath and questionable, spotty on top. If you have a personal vested interest in being proven right somehow by this being a good television program, and it's not, because the fucking guy booking it is an amateur, and everybody has just patted themselves on the back until they've blown their rotator cuffs on how great they are when they ain't great. And they won't listen. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that you covered there. In terms of the viewership, I think Dave Shearer had a good point. If TNT is happy with 800,000 viewers per week, and I expect that number to go up slightly because NXT won't be running directly against it. They're moving to Tuesdays, which funny enough caused Impact Wrestling to announce they're moving to Thursdays so they're not up against NXT.
Why don't they move to the moon?
They kind of are there already.
That's true. The dark side. Go ahead.
But I think Dave Shearer had a really good point there, because that's really what it's about. If TNT's happy with that number, and I think they are, they're happy with the key demo, as it's always talked about, and the overall number, then they're okay. And while you would think to break out and really make it an incredibly successful business, you would want to increase the amount of people that are coming in the door and checking it out and staying after they check it out. The other way to look at it is AEW, let's say on average, and I may be slightly wrong here, maybe a little bit above it, a little bit below it, but on average, they're getting 120,000 buys per pay-per-view. That's a pretty good conversion rate. I mean, again, it's their hardcore audience. It's the people that are going to tune in even if there is a song and dance segment or a bad wedding or whatever it may be. They're coming back. But they're converting a pretty significant chunk of that audience into paying customers.
Yeah.
4 times a year at $50 a pop. That's impressive.
Yeah, well, the people that, for the kind of people who like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing those people like. The people that are dedicated followers are going to go all the way with it. And they're the ones that Dave mentioned have always thought the business needed to bring Vince to his, or they needed to bring Vince to his knees, and the business needed something else, and that's what they want. So of course they're going to be the most sensitive to criticism and the most unable. I've said this to me, when somebody is over, you can't see the flaws. Steve Austin, for the great worker and talent and mega box office attraction he was, the stomp in the mud hole, those were the fakest looking kicks in the world. But the people were going out of their fucking minds because he was over. The people that believe, that have been taught that whatever AEW is doing is wrestling, and they want it to be so, they can't see the guy slipping off the top rope and falling on his ass, or missing the choreographed alley-oop in the cheerleading routine, because they want it to be so good. And that's what, in a lot of cases, carried some of the guys in the territories and in all of wrestling history, is that if you could get over, people wouldn't see your flaws. They wouldn't be as glaring as if you were just some schlub that was out there cold. So, but at the same time, you wonder when that they see that the emperor has no clothes and his little dinghy is swinging around in the wind for all to look at. And what does it take? Them just coming out and just taking a shit in the ring?
I don't think the majority of those fans are getting turned away. I think the fans that are in there already, there may be some that get disappointed. You know, we've talked about just recently Cody. There are a lot of hardcore AEW fans that don't like Cody, and that number grows each and every week, it seems. If all of a sudden Cody got pushed into the top spot and made the world champion, and he was all over that TV, I do think something like that could cause some of those people to say, you know what, I'm going to take a break. Omega and the Bucks, it's not happening like that.
If they did probably the smartest thing they could do with their title, considering what they've done in the past, that would probably send the fans over the edge. But the fucking Maki Ito doesn't run people off.
You think giving Cody the title would be the smartest thing they could do?
Well, look who's got it now. I'm not saying it.
But Omega makes the AEW fan happier than Cody does. And if we're talking about catering to that audience versus the idea of growing that audience, because then you could have Steve Austin as a champion. If the booker is putting together a show the way they are, you're not going to get all these new people in the door. So it's about what you have.
Then let me rephrase what I said. Just the best guy that would probably be there of their EVPs or top guys to carry the title and have the fucking best matches that made the most sense is Cody out of that little conglomeration, because Jericho can't perform at Cody's level anymore because we've seen that, poor fella, you know, low carb Chris. Twinkle Toes is an idiot. I'm not saying Paige wouldn't be better, but Cody's got more experience and Cody can put a big show match together, even if he does go into the, you know, a little bit overdone finishes, not nearly as overdone as the Lucha Brothers or whatever, for God's sake. So as a worker and a guy with the ability to have a logical big show match with, you know, a wide variety of people, Cody would be the best guy to fucking have the title. But, you know, I've long since tried to give up making sense of anything they do. But it's your show.
Yeah, it's my show. We didn't really talk about the fans, why they're sensitive, which was the whole point of the email, though.
Well, no, that's why I said that was the point of what I was saying. The reason why they're so sensitive is because they have a vested interest in this. That small group of people, they're going to be proven wrong if this thing flops. That's why they're so sensitive, because it's like you're telling them they're idiots because this is going to be the thing. Well, no. It ain't going to be the thing. Open up your eyes. But that's why they're fucking mad. They're sensitive because they thought that this ragtag band of indie talent collected together under a completely inexperienced booker with a wide variety of EVPs all pushing different styles, most of which make no fucking sense and only appeal to their friends and followers. They thought that this was going to be it, and Vince was going to be shitting himself, shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds, and it ain't happening, and they're pissed. That's why they're so sensitive, because as I've said many times, as a heel, I was very funny for a heel in those days, but because the people believed that I was an asshole, the ones I was going for didn't laugh at the jokes. When I would criticize Ricky and Robert, it might be a funny line for people that were smart to the business or somebody just walking by, but the goddamn little girls that liked Ricky and Robert didn't think it was funny. It's like a joke about your ugly wife. Somebody else's ugly wife, that joke's funny, but if your wife's ugly, it ain't funny. And that's their problem, these AEW fans. We're pointing out the obvious that everybody else can see that's liked wrestling for 1,000,000 years and sees this looks nothing like it. But these people, they're like, he's calling my wife ugly. Well, she just happens to be.
And I always think back to the idea that, we've said it before, we were led to believe this would be an alternative to WWE, not alternative WWE. This is an independent version of WWE. And what so many of us hoped for was, and I'm not saying you could just go copy Mid-South from 1984, But the point of it was that Mid-South pretended it was legitimate. I shouldn't even use the word pretend. Mid-South on TV was legitimate.
Yes.
Whatever happened off TV didn't matter. On TV, everything was logical. It was reasonable. It was presented like adults having issues. At times, some of them are wacky. At times, some of them are really serious. It wasn't this wrestling variety show with wrestling level comedy and skits and things that don't make any sense and logic holes in everything you do. And sports-based wrestling was a term they threw out there, not us. But then again, they also led people to believe they were going to give the wrestlers health insurance, and that didn't happen either.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Well, that was fucking insane on the surface of it to begin with also. Which, as a matter of fact, I believe I can't say what I told Tony Khan on that conversation because they're of the NDA, so I won't say that. But it would, just as a casual observer with no inside knowledge, that would be a nutty thing to try to do if you're only going to fucking run TV one day a week and let your guys work for other people. So, but anyway, it's your show.
All right, well, let's get moving with this here show. Jim, have you been following the, I guess feud is the word, between Randy Orton and Soulja Boy?
Well, I know that it exists and have purposely not checked into it to see anything more because I'm afraid that Soulja Boy will join Bow Wow Wow and Snoop Doggy Dogg and Bugs Bunny and all the rest of these people in the wrestling business, and I don't want to see more rappers.
Well, I don't know if he's trying to get into the wrestling business. Unlike Bow Wow or others, he has not indicated he's trained to be a wrestler. I don't believe he has the size.
I thought Bow Wow Wow and Snoop Doggy Dogg was it? Didn't Snoop Doggy Dogg used to say Bow Wow Wow?
Yes, but Bow Wow, formerly Lil Bow Wow, is a separate entity.
Wait, what happened? Did he grow up?
He grew up. He was a kid when he first got signed.
God damn it.
So, Randy Orton and Soulja Boy.
What about Lil Wayne then? Is he an adult?
He's an adult, although the size of a child.
So he's a midget.
I don't know if he's a midget. What's technically...
Or a dwarf?
I don't know if he's that short.
Or just a scrawny, undersized motherfucker.
Maybe that.
Okay.
I really don't know. But back to Randy Orton and Soulja Boy. What do you know about this?
Well, I just told you a minute ago, absolutely nothing. But no, I saw somebody on Twitter look at the screenshots. Orton and Soulja Boy are going back and forth. And that's when I neglected to fucking check into it further. So let me know what they've been doing.
Well, apparently, this has been going on now for over a month. On the 28th of February, Soulja Boy tweeted out, "The rap game is faker than WWE." Causing T-Bar, of all people, to tweet back, "Does the rap game take years off your life and leave you with countless injuries and debilitating pain? Oh well, maybe just stick to super soaking hose or whatever it is you did 15 years ago."
What the? Okay, was he a super soaker?
You know what? I must admit, I'm not.
What do you know about Soulja Boy?
I don't know really much of anything about Soulja Boy other than I've heard the name.
Soulja Boy, oh my little Soulja Boy.
Who is that? The Shirelles?
She will fuck you up.
The Shirelles?
I believe it was. Yes,
the Shirelles. Great song.
Yeah.
Well, Randy Orton replied to T-Bar's comment to Soulja Boy and said, "Fake? Dare this prick to step up. He don't like movies? Consider us actors that do stunts without pads 200 days a year and don't bitch when we get surgically repaired and come right back. Consider us 100 times tougher than anyone you've come across. Ain't nothing but a bitch ass."
Well, and Randy knows the lingo there.
To which Soulja Boy replied, "Do you know who the fuck I am?
We don't.
I'll bring the real to wrestling. Don't play with me, Randy Orton." And the N is there several times, and then about 7 question marks. So Randy Orton replied to that, "Crank that, and it's in quotes, so I'm guessing Crank That may be a Soulja Boy hit tune, came out in 2007. You had a hell of a year. Serious money. Hats off to you, my dude. Here's the thing, though. I like rap. I bump that shit all day. Whether it's Tunichi, Meek, Jay-Z, but you call what I do to survive fake? Fuck that. Come to my world and say that. Dare you.
Yeah.
To which Soulja Boy replied.
And I wish he had admitted he actually listens to some of this dreck, but, you know.
Well, he bumps to that shit all day.
He bumps to it all day?
That's what he said.
Randy hadn't taken that many bumps in a long time.
Soulja Boy replied to Randy Orton, "If you mad because I spit facts, just say that. What you do is fake," all in caps, fake. And I stand on that. What I do is real. Come to your world, laugh out loud. Welcome to Soulja World.
Oh, good Lord. What he does is real. What does he do? He makes noise and records it, and people buy it. Yes, I guess that's real, but what does that have to do with the fucking situation? He's still not going to be able to fucking whip cream with an outboard motor, much less whip Randy Orton's ass. He's acting like he physically thinks he can whip Randy Orton.
To which Soulja Boy replied, to which Randy Orton replied, "You spittin' facts? Seems like all you spittin' is the same mess you rap about. Nut. Clear your throat, my dog, and be there. Enough talk. Back it up." To which Soulja Boy replied,
"Oh my God.
I'm trying to make sense of this. Cap wrestler with a little emoji of a man laughing with tears in his eyes and a little hat. If you really want Big Draco to pull up, say less."
Who, what?
If you really want Big Draco or Draco, D-R-A-C-O, to pull up, say less. Now, for the record, in Soulja Boy's Twitter handle, in parentheses next to Soulja Boy, it says Draco or Draco, D-R-A-K-O. So it's a different spelling of whatever he said here. I don't know. Well, to which Bow Wow replied,
"Bow Wow's involved."
"Yo, Soulja Boy, these wrestlers are terrified. I've been giving them the business since I announced I was training. They so scared we gonna take all they shine." So now Bow Wow's apparently in this mix here. I'm trying to scroll down. In January, there was a beef between Cardi B and Lacey Evans. I don't know what is going on here. So now I'm opening this. Here's the fake tweet again. P.S. San Benito would beat the fuck out of you. This is from Randy Orton to Soulja Boy. I don't know who San Benito is. Why? How?
He's Benito Guardini's illegitimate son.
He would beat the fuck out of you. Why? How? Because he's seen our world, respects it, and knows what it takes to find himself lucky to be a part of it. You want to talk fake? Pawn that cheap-ass chain and come work for it, you one-hit wonder-ass motherfucker. Oh, by the way, I think San Benito is Bad Bunny. So, Randy Orton throwing Bad Bunny into the mix here. So apparently these two are still going at it over a month later.
And they have a lot of spare time, apparently.
That's apparently the thing. So the most recent excursion here into the world of Randy Orton and Soulja Boy, I'm trying to find what caused this to happen this time. Soulja Boy tweeted out 13 hours ago, as of the one I'm reading here, "You a bitch, Randy Orton, and I mean that, 100% pussy." And Randy Orton replied, "My dick taller than you. Weighs more too. Go to bed, you fucking infant. You're welcome for the boost. Go choke on a keyboard." By the way, hold on. Let me just look up real quick. Soulja Boy. I want to see if there's a height and a weight. He's 5'8".
Oh, for God's sake.
And very skinny. So I don't know what to think about this. What do you think about wrestlers and rappers?
He knows that Randy Orton isn't going to beat him up because then he could sue Randy Orton, which is what the little punk ass bitch would do. And obviously there's, Randy Orton's not going to sue little fucking soldier girl or whatever because number one, he wouldn't win the fight. And number two, how it would bury Randy Orton after he kicked the shit out of the guy to fucking sue him. So Randy can't come out of it well, but this guy knows that nothing's going to happen to him, which is why he's running his fucking dick licker.
Well, apparently I have an article here from SE Scoops by Jake Jeremy, whoever that may be.
Oh, I thought SE Scoops was the author of the piece.
Apparently Bow Wow had to call Soulja Boy about all this. Here's the quote. I had to call Soulja. I said, Soulja, you made fun of Randy Orton. The guy has 6.5 million fans. He's not one of those guys that needs your retweets. Randy Orton is a star. He's there. Leave him alone. Go after The Miz. All right. Interesting. Well, all these rappers getting involved with WWE storylines. You know who WWE needs in the middle of all this? Enzo Amore.
I don't think that anybody has ever said, as answer to the question, you know what the WWE needs, somebody answered Enzo Amore.
For a battle of rappers? By the way, apparently he has a rap concert in Louisville coming up in the next few weeks.
I thought we had passed some kind of state law against Enzo Amore. We might have to be watching all the highways in case he tries to come in from Indiana.
All right, well, that answers for everyone who sent in about Randy Orton and Soulja Boy. That's all you're going to get here this week.
That's all you're going to get.
Jim, you brought up something to me before we started recording today about Smoky Mountain and ECW, and I'm curious what
I did.
Wanted to talk about there.
Well, I was telling you that if we got stuck for a question, but this was a very interesting question that I got an email on, and I printed it out, and we bumped it from the program a week or so ago because we had other things going on, and now I can't find the email, but I will paraphrase the question because it was easy to remember. And basically, it boiled down to the person who wrote the email said, Jim, every time that someone wants to discredit your opinion on wrestling or illustrate in some way that you don't know what you're talking about, they point out that Smoky Mountain Wrestling went out of business. By that same standard, would then it also be said that Paul Heyman knows absolutely nothing about wrestling and whose opinion should be discredited because ECW went out of business? And that was a very interesting way of wording that. And I got to thinking because I've several years ago, it's been a long time since I said this, but so for the new listeners, I figured up one time that I could have run Smoky Mountain Wrestling the exact same amount of time, the exact same people, the exact same way, the exact same shows, television programs, etc., and only made one change in 4 years. If I had never charged a penny for anybody to come in and see the shows, never sold a sponsorship, or never taken in $1, I still would not have lost as much money as Paul Heyman did running ECW. So, in the category of failed businesses, Brian, is it not fair to say that I scored higher because I didn't lose nearly as much money as Heyman did? Or is that how we grade things? I mean, we'll talk about this more seriously, but that's the gist of the conversation. How come I get, if you want to go by that standard, then almost nobody except Vince McMahon in the wrestling business ever knew what they were doing because everybody at one time or another went out of business.
Well, a couple of things briefly before we go further into this. One, when ECW went out of business, one of the big differences too is its wrestlers went into debt. Chris Candido, Tommy Dreamer, various wrestlers, they were putting up money for the company and they never got that money back.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like the company lost money, they went out of business. The wrestlers who worked there went into debt over ECW. But what I was going to say is, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the other big differences that people sometimes miss, ECW went out of business because there were no other options for it. They lost their TV. They weren't getting more TV. There just wasn't money. Like I said, the wrestlers were putting up money for the company. It was as dead as you could be, even though they had some good talent. Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I won't even say went out of business, was shut down by you. You could have continued. Yep. You got to the point where you said, we're not where I thought we would be at this point. I don't know what the future will be. I don't want to continue on this path. You chose to shut it down. You could have kept going. That was your decision.
Yes. Well, because we got to a situation where I saw us owing people more money in the future than we did right then, especially the wrestlers. And I knew that we were at a point that I could pay everybody off eventually at that point. But going further, it was going to get increasingly out of reach. And because the timing of the situation happening between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we had Thanksgiving weekend, we had no serious revenue coming in until Christmas weekend. So it would have been a month, which would have meant that not only would I have had to put my own money in paying for the TV stations that we paid for to air the programs leading up to Christmas Chaos in order to get the revenue from the Christmas weekend shows that were traditionally big. But that also on some of the spot shows coming up, I'd have to ask the guys to probably take, half their money or whatever the fuck or blah, 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 start making a bunch of deals to get to Christmas. And then let's see. It was looking better before we did Thanksgiving. But as I've mentioned, that Thanksgiving weekend that led to me make the decision that weekend was our gross from 1994. The year before was like over the weekend was like down $10,000 or $12,000. And well, if that's the case, then is Christmas going to be the same thing? And if that's the case, then I'm going to be further in the hole. And then we've got January, February, March was traditionally a strong time, but not early in January, just the way our schedule was going. And I know people are starting to get freaked out and go, what do you mean $10,000 over the weekend? Well, that's nothing because they're thinking about modern wrestling economics. But that's what I want to talk a little bit about in this discussion, because they don't understand not only what the wrestling economics of the entire business were 25 years ago, but also the differences in what I was trying to do and what Paul was trying to do. But we can hit the high point. I hit the high point by saying I could have run the whole company and not lost the money that Paul did. When Smoky Mountain, when ECW closed down, they were in bankruptcy. It went to court. What was the figure? You know these things better than I do in modern history of that era, but $8 million?
I forget the figure. I don't even want to say that sounds right because I'm not sure off the top of my head.
It sounds about right, but point is, it went to court, bankruptcy. The people had claims on things and liens on things, and who was going to get the video library, and Vince went into. I wish we'd actually done some research on this now, but Vince went in and made the purchase in bankruptcy court, right? For the video catalog, but it wasn't even the actual complete video catalog, because Paulie had sold some of that to Feinstein, some of the house show videos they did. And the point is, you will agree everything was a mess, and there were multiple creditors, not just wrestlers, but also various production companies and people that filed documents with the court to get their money.
I would agree. I think anyone who has ever paid attention to this, anyone who's a fan of you and Paul Heyman will recognize Paul Heyman's not a businessman. And what I mean is, you were trying to run a business, a legitimate business, and you got to your wit's end because you didn't see how things were going to improve quickly. Paul was more of, do anything you have to do today to get to tomorrow. And
I like the way you phrased that.
And I think that's why ECW ended up in the position at the end that it did, because everything was, let's just get through today. We'll do this all today and let's work on tomorrow. And that's how ECW ended up in debt and all these deals. Like you said, the video catalog was a mess. Wrestlers went broke. It was a disaster.
Well, but anyway, I will contradict something you just said. I'm going to tell you right now, I wasn't a good businessman. I was a shitty businessman too, but I was a shitty businessman in a different way and for a different reason than Paul's. We've both always been shitty businessmen.
You were more responsible.
Well, I will not argue with that. But the point is, in contrast, what we did was, everybody knows that Rick Rubin was our financial backer, and the conversations that we had, about the bemoaning the state of wrestling at the time, which led to trying to resurrect a traditional territory. But the money, nobody else ever had any money invested in Smoky Mountain Wrestling except for Rick Rubin and me. I'm not saying the sponsors didn't buy sponsorships or whatever the fuck, but I'm talking about investing money in the business. Nobody's money was ever in the business except Rick Rubin and me. And basically, as I've told a story before, when we would be short or something unexpected would happen and what we got from Rick didn't stretch, that's when mine went in. And for quite a while there, I was working for the WWF to be able to afford to run Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But as far as, there was no bankruptcy, there was no court proceedings, because Rick didn't want the money that he put into Smoky Mountain Wrestling back. That was not the deal. I'm not saying he wouldn't have liked to have had it, but he didn't demand his money back. And with his net worth, even at that time, it would have been the same as if a guy worth $1 million over the course of 4 years invested 40 or 50 grand in something that he was interested in, right? He wanted it to do well. Part of the reason why we were running on a shoestring is because he said, here's what we're going to do. Spend as little money as possible. That was from the start. So I would figure out how we could do things as cheaply and inexpensively as possible. And so did Sandy Scott, which is, once again, reason why none of this ended up in court. We ran for 4 years. But when we closed down, there was a difference, as you said, in what talent was owed. And also, I'm not saying Rob Van Dam wasn't, I think he went right to, or already had gone to the WWF at that point. He wasn't like hurting financially, but didn't Paul owe him $100 and something thousand? Just Rob Van Dam. I believe he was the big one, because he was signing these guys to 6-figure contracts. But
he had to. It's important to note, at a certain point, ECW had no choice, because WCW and eventually WWE were signing up everybody. If Paul wanted to hang on to any talent, it's kind of like what happened in the 80s. He had to sign them to these big contracts, whether or not he could pay them or not. He had to do it.
And that's what I was going to bring up. And guys were signing them. And Paul's obvious talents have always been as a performer and a manager and a booker. He gets the best out of, what he's got to work with, and he's very creative and everything. But his biggest talent is a motivational speaker. How he was able to convince these guys that he was going to honor 6-figure contracts. They were smoking the hopium, as Joe Koff would say. They were in the category of, as we just talked about, the AEW fans who just didn't want to sit. They wanted to believe it. I mean, when me and Bobby and Stan signed the contracts with Crockett for $225 grand a year apiece, we went out in the parking lot. I've said this and said, he can't pay this, but we've got something on paper. So we're going to get something. And we were already making over $100 grand a year, but those guys in ECW, they had to see. But anyway, point is, he owed talent. Candido had told me that this is the way that he got Candido and Tammy, at least. I don't know what he probably had a specialized story for each guy that he had put money in some way or another. But the guys wanted to help so bad that he nominated or appointed Candido and Tammy to be in charge of travel and made them like office assistants with some kind of verbal title. And they were putting the wrestlers' plane tickets and travel on their personal credit cards so they'd be reimbursed later. And it ended up that they had bought, I don't know, I think they did buy a house that they really liked when they had the, WWF run and made the money. And a couple years later, they're doing this, and they ended up having to fucking move out of the house because they couldn't pay. Their credit went to shit because they couldn't pay for the plane tickets they'd charged for Paulie. Anyway, we owed in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, when I closed down, all talent collectively, every wrestler that I owed money to totaled a little bit less than $10,000. And I knew I could pay that off. And I did within, that was November, December, January. By February, when I had started in Connecticut, I had already sent checks and paid, all those guys off because it was a number. I didn't know anybody more than $1,000 individually. So it was a variety of, I cleaned that up first. And our biggest bills, and by the way, I still owe Mustafa $100 from a year before that, which is, I've mentioned, because when the Gangstas no-showed me, he didn't come to pick up his payoff for his last show he worked. Anyway, Paulie owed the production companies and the pay-per-view the cable people, blah, blah, blah. As a matter of fact, Candido told me another story. He told me that for one of those pay-per-views, may have been the first one they did, but for one of the big ECW pay-per-views, that was back when they had the, they used to have the Barker Channel thing, remember? And they would show the 30-minute promotional video over and over and over. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course.
He was supposed to produce a promotional video for like On Demand or whoever was operating the pay-per-view. And he kept blowing the deadlines. And finally, I don't know whether this is something he told Chris. Candido wouldn't have made it up. I don't know why he would have made this up to tell Candido, Paulie. But Candido said that the pay-per-view company ended up fining ECW $50,000 because they wouldn't present the goddamn contractually obligated fucking Barker Channel preview video of the pay-per-view that they were supposed to be running. But even if that's a made-up story, what the fuck is going on in that office? Because then I said, Chris, you can't mean it. He said, well, Paul he was doing promos and he was in the guy's basement. And, whoever they used to do the promos and the editing in the basement, he was down there for 36 hours doing TV and he wouldn't come up and they fined him $50,000. I'm like, what the fuck is going on with these people? Whether they would get fined $50,000 or whether he'd let one of his boys think he just got fined $50,000 because he couldn't be bothered to send the deal in, whatever the fuck. The point is, on our production end, we dealt with one production company, the folks at Channel 3 down in Chattanooga. And Ron DeCiani, who was the head of that department, he later went on, moved to Chicago, worked on the Montel Williams show. But anyway, they had the master tapes of all the Smoky Mountain shows. And I told him, I said, I'm going up to Connecticut and be working in the office there. You've got the tapes as collateral. I owed them, I'm going to say $20-something thousand. And I said, I will be paying that off because I'm working on a couple things. Don't do anything with those tapes. Because that's what, again, the financials of wrestling from 25 years ago. What we're talking about now is Howard Brody was earnestly trying to get us an international television deal to buy the TV tapes, which in the 90s, many international television companies in various countries around the world bought wrestling tapes from America. This is not a made-up thing. This was a big business. Howard Brody had Ring Warriors. They sold the New Japan tapes. He was partners with Hiro Matsuda. He sold them in Germany, and he sold the whole 9 yards. So it was, at that time, one of the ways that a wrestling promotion could get an income with very little expense was to get an international TV deal. And I mean, the stories from the 80s, especially, which is when it started, when everything blew up, the Savoldi tapes, somebody in Brazil would pay $500 a week. Just send me a tape, whatever. You've seen those deals. So Howard was working on getting us an international several, trying very earnestly. And if that had happened, if we could have had a guaranteed income like that of $10,000 or $15,000 a month, talk about $2,500, $3,000 a week, whatever, I wouldn't have shut Smoky Mountain Wrestling down. Now that's catering money to a lot of people. But they don't understand that was a difference in a territory business. And what Paul was trying to do, which is he never had a territory and wasn't trying to make it a territory. He really wanted to have a national television promotion, which was with what he had to work with and the financial backing he had, even at that time, a fucking slim hope at best. What we were trying to do was a territory where guys could come in and make good money and be in the wrestling business and hopefully either get experience if they were younger or have a place to go after they had, worked the big televisions with a name, but it was an easier schedule and a regional situation, completely different. So anyway, ended up with, by May, I think, Howard sold, God, what was it, 60 or 80 Smoky Mountain TV shows to Germany. And I think for like $150 a week, he sold all 200 of them to somebody to a cable place in Japan. What was that? I want to say Nakatomo Corporation, but I may be confusing the movie. But anyway, so with that money, he took his commission and wired me the rest, and I turned around and paid the production company and got the tapes back and cleaned up another couple of bills and actually put some of that money back in my pocket, because I had six figures, right? A little over six figures in it. And Ruben, as I said, had put up the rest of the money. Nobody else had lost anything. I think a few of the crew members on the last taping that we did freelance, crew people that lived in the Tri-Cities, Tennessee area. And the average cameraman, audio guy at that point is $200. I sent out a few checks to addresses I had, and a couple of them by that point had come back because people move around. I didn't put the FBI out after them because I wasn't getting any angry phone calls. So I can honestly say that the only money that Smoky Mountain Wrestling ended up owing, hopefully they're not listening now. Well, the statue, as people say, the statute of limitations. You see that statute of limitations is out front of every courthouse. The statute of limitations has run out. We owed a radio station in Knoxville, WIVK, the most expensive fucking goddamn commercials in radio history. It was the big country station in town, and their ratings dwarfed everything else, and it was like buying a car to get 60 seconds on fucking WIVK. The radio station, and a radio station in Johnson City, and possibly a few dollars to our old friends at Fox 43 that charged us like paid programming, even though we were their highest rated program every Sunday until Fox Network kicked in. And I think I might have owed them for 3 or 4 weeks at the end there, but it was less than 20 grand for all of those people who bent over backwards to take our money and give us also almost no help. So that's what we ended up owing. Nobody went to court. Nobody got fucking thrown out a window. And then in the every story ends with a happy ending. I got my money back when I sold the library to the network. Well, actually, before the network, to the WWE when they first started buying footage. And by the time I paid taxes on what they paid me, I ended up with my investment back. And I'll say one other thing before I open the floor up to questions. But you had mentioned earlier, it was my decision to shut it down because I'd talked to Ruben, and here was the arrangement. He never agreed to put any set amount of money in this thing. He said, I will get it started. I will fund it, get it up and running. And his basic instruction to me at the start of the thing was, as long as I am spending less and you are making more, we will continue in that direction. More like a much more politely worded and verbose statement, much like Ole made to Jarrett that summer of '83. It's a shits now. It can't get any worse. As long as it gets better, keep doing it. And that's what happened. He obviously, we started in 1992. He paid the startup costs, obviously, to shoot the original TVs and to make the deals, get things on the air and get things running, and the initial equipment we need. And I still wish that we'd bought a brand new ring truck from the start, because we spent a lot of money in that area of trying to save money. But then we didn't start running shows really full time until the summer of 92. So 92 was the start. 93 was much better because business started to pick up. People started to realize what was going on. The Rock and Roll Express were back together. For a while there, I've mentioned this, we had more people buying tickets to see spot shows in little towns in Virginia, like Council, Virginia, and Hayside, and all those places. You'd have 1,000 people there to see the Rock and Roll Express, and wrestling's back on TV. And it was a big deal in the small towns at first, but it took Knoxville and Johnson City a while. But then in 93, we got them to start coming. 94 was the best year we had financially and at the gate, because everything was clicking and the TVs had penetrated. We had sponsors now. People were starting to see what was going on, and we were doing well with that. The 94 was the year Night of the Legends. So at that period of time in wrestling, we were the only promotion, I think it's fair to say, that was actually getting bigger instead of smaller. WCW from 92 to 94, their house shows ranged from bleak to embarrassing, right? It was brutal. At some points in our run, we drew more people in Knoxville than they were in the Omni in Atlanta. The WWF business was down. Remember, because of the steroid trials, and obviously there were outside factors. But from 92 through 94, WWF live event business, and I believe TV ratings, had declined. Memphis, other end of the state, had been a territory, had been there for 50 years. I think that was the period of time. Didn't they actually left the Mid-South Coliseum and went to another smaller building for a while there, on the fairgrounds in Memphis? And then Randy Hale's booking, and especially with the USWA and Smoky Mountain feud, he got them back. But at that time, Louisville had become their, one of their biggest towns, just because Memphis had fallen off. So, and I don't know what ECW was doing, because that was the years Todd Gordon had formed it, and then Eddie Gilbert, and then Paul E. got brought in by Eddie, and then all that stuff. But I know it was a little early for them, but they weren't really making any noise. So to defend Rick Rubin's status and qualities as a businessman, it wasn't like he was just pouring money down a well because he was, enjoyed the product. There was growth year over year obviously we weren't doing pay-per-view like WCW or WWF and the merchandising, whatever, but in the metrics that you could compare, live event attendance, broadcast TV ratings, we were the only company going up. And it wasn't until 95, for a variety of reasons that we can discuss, talent changing, the whole business falling in a hole, the guys we had getting stale. The Rock and Roll Express were still there, but now it had been 2 years, 3 years. How do you replace the Rock and Roll Express? But what happens when they get used to the Rock and Roll Express? So 95 was the year that we went in the opposite direction, and we tried to cut costs and trimmed things down to where an extra $15,000 a month would have been the whole difference. But at that point when Rick said, okay, you don't have to close. We don't have to close. We can, because he still had infrastructure. Their company out in California paid for our insurance and a few other things. He said, you do what you want. As long as you can break even and make it work, we can do this indefinitely. But when the TV deal didn't come in and it didn't look like we could break even, I didn't have the facility to put any more in it, and I wasn't going to owe people a bunch of money. And then Tracy Smothers even came. There's a woman in Eastern Kentucky. She'll give us $50,000. I'm like, great. Then I'd owe some woman in Eastern Kentucky $50,000 because now Vince is losing money. That's the other thing. In 1995 was the famous fucking year that he ripped all the goddamn water coolers off the 4th floor at Titan Tower because they were losing millions of dollars. And if Vince is losing money, things were not looking fucking bright for everybody else, and I didn't want to get stuck in that spot.
You had a lot of guys doing that, though, because I remember Tracy talking to me on the phone about that, about the potential investor. He never told me the amount of money. He just told me that he had someone. But Buddy Landell, same thing. He told me, like, oh, I had someone who, you know, but again, no amount was ever given to me. And knowing how much things cost, I don't know how legitimate. I mean, Horner had a guy that was going to pay $40,000.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is, and Tracy and Buddy sure didn't know a lot of women with $50,000. I'll just say that. But no, it wasn't like, okay, yes, then in that case, we can kick the can down the road. But, and of course, if I had been able to have a time machine or the precognition abilities of Nostradamus and known that the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era and wrestling was going to get hot in 18 months or 20 months or whatever it was, it still would have been a while to wait. But it may have been different. But right then, as you look, I think, wasn't there a period of time in there in the mid-90s about that same time where WCW had just pretty much suspended house shows entirely and was just doing TV tapings?
Yeah.
Vince McMahon is pulling the water coolers out of the office at Titan Tower, and I still remember when he was cussing, when I got there in 96, he was still cussing that spring with, last year I lost $6 million out of my ass. So at that point in time, you're like, what the fuck? This is not looking good to do this anymore. And so that's why I made that decision. But I felt the same way about Ruben's money as I do about the merchandise. I've made a deal, so I'm going to treat this like my own. Horner told a story. Somebody's shoot interview. They sent me a clip. And fucking Horner told a story. Well, I went over to his house one time. He went over to my house 2 or 3 times, unfortunately. And he had like $20,000 in cash sitting on his coffee table. I said, ain't you going to go to the bank? He said, I will sometime. Good God. The only time we ever had $20,000 in cash in front of us was when we got his fucking friend at the bank in Morristown, old Buzzy. Buzz was the banker's name. To fucking get 20 grand for a TV angle, put it in a briefcase, come and show it on TV. And when he came in, nobody knew who was behind Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So all the fucking boys thought the banker from Morristown, Buzz, was the fucking money man and were falling all over themselves to bring him a Coke and a chair and everything else. But that was the point is we were never at a point where we had a lot of resource finances to pick from. We were from one month to the next, which is why I was always somewhat on edge. Go ahead.
A few questions. One, I'm sure you've heard it. So many people have said it throughout the years that if you had just held on a little bit longer, 96 is when the wrestling boom started. And everyone got lifted up because of that. And I'm curious if you think that's true, if it would have affected you that way. Like I said earlier, WCW and WWF eventually were gobbling up every bit of talent they can get their hands on. Paul was promising guys money, whether or not he knew he wasn't going to be able to pay for it, who knows? But do you think it's as simple as there was a wrestling boom, Smoky Mountain Wrestling would have had a boom too, or would you have had issues still, especially considering you would have had to find talent to get in there that wasn't going to immediately get signed? because you weren't signing guys to contracts.
Right.
By WCW. What do you think would have happened if you had held on for another 6 months, let's say another year? Would you have gotten swept up in the wrestling boom, or would it have not affected you as much as everyone else?
Well, both. I remember when I was up in Connecticut hearing reports of they were having outlaw shows in the old Eastern Kentucky Smoky Mountain area that were drawing 2,000 people with just hardly anybody on them, because all of a sudden wrestling was hot and everybody was paying attention. So I'm like, well, fuck, Newman, right? Couldn't happen 3 years ago. But that was the same thing Jerry Lawler said. The first time that the WWF in the 90s, when Lawler was doing Raw, ran Evansville, Indiana, they went to Roberts Stadium, the big building in town, and sold out. 6-figure house, like 10,000 people, whereas Evansville in the Memphis territory at the Coliseum, the old place, had been a Wednesday night stop for 20 years, and a good crowd in Evansville in any day was 1,000 people. And so there's 10,000 people, and Lawler walks out on stage. They introduce him, getting ready to start Raw, and the people give him a standing ovation, and he's playing the music, and he's standing there. He's like, where were you motherfuckers when I ran this town every Wednesday night? So that's kind of the way I thought about that when I'd hear some things like the spot shows and et cetera. But we could have run mega events in Knoxville and Johnson City during the Attitude Era. And because we already had sold out the Knoxville Coliseum twice for our big summer shows, just bringing in a few WWF guys or a legend like Road Warrior Hawk or doing the Night 11, whatever the case. That's one thing we were able to do, is snag the people for the big events, the several events a year they had to see, the Bluegrass Brawl, whatever the case. But so if we'd had access to the WWF talent like we had in 94 and 95, in 98 and 99, well, you could have put some of those guys on the card and just automatically drawn a huge house because of their name and they're coming there in person. However, they weren't going to come run the territory or work the territory. You weren't going to have them on your spot shows. So it would have been feast and famine. It already kind of was, in that in 1995, our spot shows, we ran 3 to 4 shows a week, but only Knoxville was only once a month. Johnson City was only once a month. We ran Barberville, Kentucky once a month. It did very well there, but it was still a smaller town. I lost the Heavenly Bodies in 94 to the WWF brought them up, but at the same point, they'd already been there for a year and a half or 2 years at that point. So they were starting to get old. I don't say old chronologically, but you know what I'm saying. They're not new to the people anymore. They've been there weekly on television. The Rock and Roll Express that were so hot, they were still good. And how do you replace the rock and roll? But now they've been back together for 3 years on our weekly television. People are saying, well, why don't you replace them? Well, who was I going to replace those guys with? How do you replace the Rock and Roll Express? How do you replace the Heavenly Bodies at that level of a territory? You need somebody. I wasn't looking for guys that the big companies really wanted to sign. I wanted the guys that could work old style Southern wrestling, but those guys were aging out, which is why I loved getting guys like Candido and young guys that Al Snow, young guys that could get experience there and learn from those guys while they were still around and still in the ring.
But there's a good example. I mean, you had Al Snow for what, 6 months, 7 months, and he got gobbled up.
Yeah, but
I mean, both companies were after him. WCW was trying to get him when WWF signed him.
Yeah, but see, here's what I was going to say was, if I had continued to be in operation in Smoky Mountain Wrestling because of the political affiliations, it would have been an earlier version of developmental than what they actually ended up having, because Vince had already agreed to send me talent to battle WCW, so that's where the side would have gone. So the guys already were encouraged to sign with WWE, or WWF then, and it would have been more formal, and I would have had guys. Point I was going to make is I would have had guys for the big shows, but you can't run the whole territory and make an entire roster a living on just the big shows a few times a month. So I was running out of guys that weren't stale or could replace the talent that I had already had gotten over the previous years. 95, whether the guys were going to go to WWF or not, you have to change the talent, and I was running out of options available. So I don't think our talent was as good in 95 overall, top to bottom. I don't think my booking was as good because I was starting to get burned. Had things thrown at us when people would. Eddie Gilbert went to Puerto Rico. Some other guys, Vince would take. Some other guys he'd send me back. But to answer your overall question, yes, it would have benefited us in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the wrestling boom. But then the problem would have become when they busted, might have very well have busted too. So it's a very interesting what if in that point. But yes, some of our shows would have benefited, and we could have had access to major talent to do big shows, but we couldn't have run a full-time territory. Even under those conditions, I don't think, unless we would have had a massive influx of a new investment to open up several more TV markets. Because as I mentioned... That's what I was
about to ask. That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, well, then go ahead and ask that.
If, let's just say hypothetically, like you just said, the big shows end up being bigger, maybe you could run them a little more frequently, maybe even the spot shows get picked up. Maybe you're able to double your audiences at the spot shows just because wrestling's hot, Smoky Mountain's getting more attention, Vince is helping you because you're running closer to WCW than anyone else. If you're all of a sudden making a little bit more money, do you immediately go and say, how do I get into Chattanooga? How do I get into different towns in North Carolina? I mean, do you immediately go towards expanding the territory?
Well, no, because here's the thing. We got too big to be small, but we were still too small to be big. And do we go if we finally got to a point where we were making some money doing what we were doing, then do we say, okay, now we're going to fucking spend all that money to go try to do it next door in Charleston, Huntington, West Virginia, and over in Roanoke, and blah, 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 and start that process over again? As I said, without an influx of more legitimate investment, rather than just, okay, here's some more, we're making money on what we're doing now. Because Knoxville had been closed for 3 years, since 1989. So there had been no live wrestling on a television and major league scale. They'd had independent shows, obviously. I'm talking about a territory, TV, etc. We go in, they've been dark for 3 years. We get the TV on in February of 92. And in 2 years, actually it was February of 94, Sunday Bloody Sunday, we've gone from a brand new company they saw for the first time and starting to run monthly events to we drew over 3,000 people in the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. Because we built the town. We got the people excited about it. They got familiar with what we were doing. We went out and got sponsors. We advertised on the radio. The wrestlers were seen around town, whatever. Johnson City, Tennessee, same thing, in that they had no territory wrestling since Continental Southeastern had closed up. They had some WCW TV tapings. Well, it was like Knoxville had, but it wasn't their wrestling. So we go in with a new program, and I think the first show in Johnson City at Freedom Hall, we drew 500-something or 600-something people. But then by a couple of years later, we ran that big show in April, and we had like 12, 13, 1,400, whatever it was. Every time we could get television on in a market, what we did with Eastern Kentucky, even though we didn't actually, Hazard was where the TV station was, but that covered the Eastern Kentucky area. So we had Barberville, we had Harlan, and most importantly, Pikeville. And we go in there from scratch, and within, it didn't even take 2 years. Within the first 11 months we were on that television station, we go into Pikeville and we draw 2,000 people in Pikeville, Kentucky. Every time we got a TV market and got a consistent time slot and got a chance for the people to see the program every week, and we start running the town and the people start coming, they liked it and they came back and we were able to build the town. The problem was we didn't have any other major TV markets. We couldn't get into Charleston and Huntington, West Virginia. We tried like crazy. Now, two of the four biggest stations, actually the only four stations, I think, in Charleston, Huntington, are owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. And they put Ring of Honor on at the start. And we had, with Ring of Honor, I think it was somewhere 20-something or almost 30,000 homes watching the Ring of Honor shows between the two stations in Charleston and Huntington in 2011. And that was with the way that television is eroded. If we could have got a wrestling program that was local and coming there on television in 1993, that probably would have replaced Knoxville as our biggest live event market. But we couldn't get in there because they wanted at least $2,000 a week. We tried Lexington, Kentucky. I'd seen what that town could do, but we couldn't get in there because the TV stations didn't want wrestling unless they treated it like paid programming. The second, actually most important market that we tried to get into was Asheville, North Carolina, because of the way the TV was set up then and still is for the broadcast stations. WLOS TV, Channel 13 in Asheville, North Carolina, was also a huge station for Ring of Honor because it was a Sinclair station. They were doing like a 3-something local rating, and the general manager loves wrestling there, blah, blah, blah. But that market, one of the broadcast stations is in Asheville, one of the broadcast stations is in Greenville, South Carolina, and one of the broadcast stations is over in fucking Spartanburg. So if you got TV on in that market, you could run all three of those towns as a live event off each TV station because they all crossed over. So we were desperate to get in there. And Sandy Scott beat him up. He worked with these people for years for Crockett. But they wouldn't. It was paid programming. So what we did in Knoxville, what we did in the Tri-Cities, if we could have got those two television markets and done the same thing, we would have had four more big live event markets: Asheville, Greenville, Spartanburg, and 5, Charleston, Huntington. And they had wrestling histories. And in 1986, Greenville, South Carolina did over $600,000 in paid wrestling admissions at the Memorial Auditorium for like 42 shows. So, that's the thing is we wanted to do in those markets what we did in Knoxville, but we could never break in and get the TV for any kind of affordable price to get started. If we'd paid $2,000 a week and run the TV for 4 months and then start running shows for 6 months before they start producing, then you're so far in a fucking hole. How long does it take to get out of it?
If there's a wrestling boom, is it unreasonable to think you could have found a new sponsor that would pay you, let's say, $1,000 a week, $500 a week, and that would cover some of the costs?
Well, here's another thing. That would not be unreasonable, and that would have been a lovely thing if we could have found somebody to go out and, because already it was a case of we were like Crockett against Vince. We had look at our office infrastructure. Me and Sandy Scott, Horner's supposed to be doing something. Brian Hildebrand's doing 3 jobs, and there's Pam Lawson. She was the one who's supposed to go out and get the sponsors to pay for the TV. We had the highest rated program in the Tri-Cities on either Saturday morning or Sunday morning. We were aired on both days at one point or another. But we were the highest rated program in the market when we were on the air, except when we competed with Meet the Press. They were big with the over 70 and dead audience. We had the highest rated program in our time slot in Knoxville on the absolute weakest station in Knoxville. But after I finished booking this whole thing and performing as the heel manager and being the go-to guy with the post-production and working with the TV facility and fucking making sure that Rick Rubin's happy, I'll just spend a few days a week going out as the heel on the program that nobody knew was in charge of the company, and I'll sell sponsorships. No, that's why we tried to find people. We couldn't find anybody that could sell them. I wanted, at one point, I wanted to move Howard Brody up to East Tennessee, but he wasn't fond of the idea. So yeah, that's the thing. If we'd have had somebody that could go out and as people were starting to see that wrestling was becoming hot again, if we had somebody going out and selling it and pointing to the factual ratings and looking at, hey, these people put anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 people in the Civic Coliseum every month, and we can advertise all that stuff that I was trying to motivate somebody in that situation to do, it would have been lovely. But I was hamstrung by having to be behind the curtain and also having to sleep at least 3 hours a night.
You've talked in the past about when you first started up, there was a proposal to Ric Flair where Rick Rubin would have put up, I forget, how much was it that he would have put up?
$100,000. Well, $120,000. Because here was the deal. When Flair made it known that he was leaving, for a while there, remember, there was conjecture as to where he was going and what he was going to do. He didn't leap immediately and announce that he was with the WWF. Everybody was up in arms and wondering what was going on. So Rubin called me, he said, call Flair. Because at that time, people forget, Flair didn't need to go to work for Vince McMahon. He could have called Baba and got, what would you think? 20 weeks a year in Japan at $15,000 or $20,000 a year.
Maybe slightly more.
I'm sorry,
actually.
Not a year. $15,000 or $20,000 a week. They were paying the Road Warriors at that time, what, $12,000, and Brody and Hanson, those guys were in $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a week. Flair, not only because of who he was, but also because of his status with the NWA title, could have got that. Anyway, and that was some people were conjecturing whether or not he would just do that, or will he go to Vince? Of course, Rick, he wanted to be on TV. Let's be honest. He was going to, go to work for Vince just because he wanted to be in this country the biggest star in the business. That's why he, was so good. He always wanted to excel. Anyway, but Rubin says, call Flair up and tell him if he'll make one show a month for us, we'll give him $10,000 apiece. And you pick if he makes TV 3 months in a row and then comes to the Knoxville Coliseum and works the main event. And then he makes TV 2 months in a row and goes to Johnson City or whatever. For the notoriety, for the obviously the live event tickets that he would have sold, because you would kept him special, so people would know he's only going to be here, once or twice a year, and it's Ric Flair and a blah blah blah. Especially if he went to Japan, you can't see him anywhere else domestically. Of course, it would have been worth that. And I pitched it to Rick, and I said, between here and Japan, I was trying to lead him in that direction, but he appreciated it. But he said, I'll let you know. But he was going to go to work for Vince. So, but that was a legitimate offer that Rick Rubin made to Ric Flair. If he would, we would have had not a world champion, but he would have been the champion of something that was bigger than our regional title, so that he could come in and do a defense or whatever, but we wouldn't have had a Smoky Mountain Wrestling world champion. But that was a legitimate offer. He would have paid him the fucking money if he'd have done it.
Is there any other wrestler, let's say, going to this period of time, 95?
And by the way, hold on now. And people are saying $10,000 for Ric Flair once again, 30 fucking years ago. That was more like, what, 30 or 35 grand a day. And people weren't getting 10 grand in wrestling to just show up for one night.
Yeah, for Ric Flair, 10 grand is like one day's debt. So what?
That's the first tray of kamikazes.
When you look at this period of time, 95, 96, so a few years after that, is there anyone you could have gone back to Rick Rubin for, a specific wrestling talent that you could have said, we would have the ability to get this person? Would you be able to do something like we were thinking about doing with Flair?
Well, no, because for one thing, Flair was Rubin's favorite wrestler. Secondly, Flair was kind of unique in that instance. And also, that was as Smoky Mountain Wrestling was forming. And actually, that was, you asked me the other day who knew about Smoky Mountain ahead of time. I'm trying to think, was this right as maybe find out when Rick showed up in 92 in the WWF, because I may have had
He showed up in 91. He showed up in 91.
Okay, then he knew what I was doing. Because I forgot. I had to clue him in because that was beforehand. Did he show up in late 91, November, December?
No, they started teasing him towards the end of summer 91, because remember, the Bash was when the whole "We Want Flair" chant happened, and Flair FedExed the title belt to Vince shortly after that.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
And so you had seen him at the Arezzi convention.
Yeah.
That August also.
But I did tip him off because the first public knowledge of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and this didn't go very far, really, for what I thought it might, was when we did the first taping, the first TV taping. Bobby Fulton had found a sponsor that wanted to run some independent live events, and Bobby was booking them and running them for him. And he booked me and Stan on one in Greenville, South Carolina, at the Memorial Auditorium. And that's when I said, Bobby, if I add extra guys to the card that I pay for and bring in equipment that I pay for and give you some money for advertising to get a better crowd, can I shoot a TV taping? And that's why I kind of told Bobby a little bit about what I was doing there. And he said, okay. And so October, 27th, 1991, I believe, was it October 27th? I can't even remember. But anyway, the end of October was our first TV taping on Bobby Fulton's show. It wasn't advertised as Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I don't even know I can't remember whether we had our signage up or not, but Bob Caudle was there and we did the TV and everybody was talking about Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and it didn't get a lot of news. And then we sat on the tapes after we had the two shows posted. Those were what we gave to TV stations as here's what we're going to be doing. And we didn't go on the air until the following February. So I talked to Flair right before that taping. It must have been because that's, it was before he decided to go to work for Vince. So I smartened Flair up about Ruben also, because he had met Ruben at the Omni the previous year when I did. Because that's the two people that Ruben wanted to meet, was me and Flair.
Looking back now and knowing how the business was for Smoky Mountain Wrestling when you first started, how much of a boost do you think Ric Flair would have brought in 1992, 1993?
It would have been easier in the big towns. As I just mentioned, the spot shows came out first because they hadn't seen live wrestling. They hadn't seen the Rock and Roll Express in 5 years. They hadn't had the experience. But Knoxville and Johnson City and, towns like that had a territory die in front of them on a regular basis, they had found other things to do, and they were harder to get back, and they were harder to convince. It's not going to be we're going to give you this for 6 months and then we're gone. That's one thing, because you remember back in those days, a lot of times fans would say, well, we'll see what happens if they're going to be around or not before they'd get involved with the thing. Especially the non-smart, just regular wrestling fans. They're like, if we could have advertised Ric Flair straight up front, he'll be in the Coliseum, folks, on Friday night or whatever, that would have been instant major credibility. I mean, we had Bob Armstrong, but people had seen Bob Armstrong. That's part of the reason why we had him, because he was over, but he wasn't new. And they had independent shows that would come and go. But if you had announced at that point in time, they're on TV every week, and look, Ric Flair's wrestling for them, that would have got people's dander up quite quickly.
Do you regret selling the tapes to WWE, considering what they've done with them, and also you had no idea of knowing what kind of business Cornette's Collectibles would turn into?
Yeah.
Do you regret selling the tapes now, looking back?
I wish more people could see the whole run and see it in order. Because I was sold on the idea that they were going to eventually be putting all this stuff up. I don't regret getting my money back. And that was a lot of money to turn down. And I would have still had to, because that was 17 years ago now. I would have had to wait a long time to, and then, fuck, I'm having a hard enough time keeping Cornette's Collectibles open right now for too much work. So there were 200 episodes of television, 200 hours. And they all fit together from 1 to 200. They all have a history, and obviously we couldn't foretell the future, but they lead to something and that you get to see a payoff of. So I wish more people could see them and see them in order and how it was presented. But I did like getting my money back. I'll say, but I'll tell you, to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of more verklempt that people never will see the OVW run, because my booking was much better in OVW than it was in Smoky Mountain. It was more involved. I had more challenges thrown at me. I had more experience at it. I had better ideas. It made more sense, I think, even because we were able to do a show every week instead of a taping where we taped 3 or 4 shows at a time, which, is easier then to make things flow. And people has never, especially the old stuff at the old building from 99 till 2002. I don't think WWE will ever air that except the clips of, Cena's first this and Batista's first that. But the stuff when we moved in the new building from 2002 till pretty much the end, 2005, was my best booking work ever. And especially when I was having to jump through all the hoops that they were sending me to make the shit make sense anyway.
Do you regret selling those tapes?
Well, no, here's the thing.
Or were you in a tough situation over the ownership where?
Well, for one thing, it wasn't all my decision because Danny Davis was involved. Secondly, as we've mentioned before, they wrote a bad contract, and it was more like they needed OVW at the time because they hadn't figured out a way to fuck Danny yet. And so they had to give us a payment to clear up any disputed rights that there may be to the TV shows, is the way that they phrased it. They were giving us that money just to make sure that but they own it. Well, then why are you giving us this money if you think you fucking ironclad own this shit? So, but I think even if I, for artistic purposes, would have liked my work to be seen by a wider audience, Danny would have probably said, that's a lot of fucking money. And so it wasn't all my decision. And at the same time, what could we have done with it anyway? Who's going to sit down? I booked, what's 6 years times 52? I booked 300 and approximately 20 consecutive hours of wrestling television. Who's ever going to sit down and watch all that from start to finish? And the same thing, it made sense from start to finish, and it had a history, and it led somewhere. But I don't know how we would expose that to a wide audience. But anyway, yeah, that was the thing. They just announced one day when they kept telling us things that we couldn't do with our TV show. And we actually had a couple of international deals. Still in the 2000s, that was a thing. And they said, no, we don't want the show on there. We don't want you to deal with this person. We're like, what the fuck? Then one time they even started paying. So we wouldn't sell VHSs of OVW TV. They started to Rob Feinstein. They started sending us the money that he had offered us per week to buy the tapes just to not send him the tapes. But finally they acted like, well, we own the TV shows, the OVW shows. And Danny Davis said, it was not brought to my attention, and I was not aware that I'd sold the rights to the TV show that I produce and fucking pay to air, that I started in the company that I own and founded, to you. And they said, oh, see right here, we had signed the original developmental contract stated that they would send us some contract talent for us to provide our training services for, but that they would own the tapes of these performers. Well, at first, we were doing a weekly 1-hour television program with referees and a full crew of wrestlers and announcers and et cetera. And they sent us 6 guys, 3 or 4 of whom had never wrestled before and so weren't even television ready. So I said, so you mean because we had 2 guys under your contract on that first TV show, that means from then on you own all these TV shows? What about all the non-contract talent and announcers and referees and personnel? And the fact that we have paid to produce and air this in our markets from our company that is incorporated in the state of Kentucky. Fuck you, you don't own shit on our TV shows. And I can't remember what it was. It was a nice little payment that they sent down to clear that issue up, and then they owned the TV shows.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has actually been a lot of fun talking about this stuff. I'm going to ask you another wrestling history-related question from myself in a moment. But first, I want to say that, you know, thinking about the way your tapes have been handled, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, OVW, this rich wrestling history, you may want to look into if there's a way to claw back the deal. And perhaps you need an attorney who likes battling these corporate giants who like to come down on the little guy and just beat him up. Perhaps you need someone who loves kicking some ass in the courtroom.
Someone who has some experience in suing professional wrestling organizations. Someone who fights for the little guy and brings the big man to his knees, screaming, "Uncle, uncle, uncle." I wonder who that man could be.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, whether it be an evil empire in professional wrestling or just a heartless conglomerate that has sold you poisoned jujubes, whatever the case may be, our friend and yours, Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, can fix you up and put you back on the path to righteousness, bring the offending parties to their knees, and in a very nice but firm way tell them, pay up. And by the way, I've just recently gotten my paperwork. You know, I don't know if I even on my keyboard have one of those little fucking symbols that you put next to the trademark names, but by God, Jim Cornette, I own Jim Cornette. It's the best purchase I've ever made. I have no buyer's remorse. And anybody that bandies around Jim Cornette or puts my name on their lips, or more importantly, tries to make money off of it, is now officially on the wrong side of the government and on the wrong side of the aforementioned attorney that you need to retain for your problems, Stephen P. New. I own me now. Stephen P. New can make you people own yourselves, and he will own anyone else who tries to intimidate you.
You know who better watch out? 3M.
Yeah, those 3M people with they manufactured defective earplugs and caused damage to our service people. 3M is going to be 3P after Stephen P. New gets finished with them. Piss poor and poor. That's 3 Ps. And puny.
Yeah. That's 3. Now it's 3.
That's 3. Now it's 3, maybe 4. We don't know. The point is, you don't even have to count. Stephen will do the counting for you. And he'll do the thinning for you, too. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen. If you need to sue, call Stephen P. New.
What does 3M stand for?
I don't fucking know. How about that?
There we go.
It stands, if they fight Stephen P. New in court, it's going to be fried, dyed, and laid to the side and dicked by the dingle dong of destiny. That's what it's going to be.
All right, we'll see if that gets into any newspaper stories. But, Jim, I wanted to ask you a question from me, and then we're going to get some listener questions and a few songs and get out of here. But we talked last week about Mid-South Wrestling. Of course, me and Mike Mills review Mid-South Wrestling on the Mid-South Wrestling Television Review podcast. at midsouthpod.com, wherever you find your favorite shows. The week before you debut on TV, it is announced that Dennis Condrey, a newcomer, will be debuting the next week.
You mentioned this. We talked about this here recently. I had never heard that until you said it.
And then the next week is the debut of the Midnight Express on TV.
Because actually it was 2 weeks different because they taped every 2 weeks. So even though television-wise it was a week's difference, chronologically it was 2 weeks apart.
And there's a lot of interesting things happening on that episode when you debut, and it really made me wonder about what did Bill Watts already figure out he was going to do, and what was he trying to figure out? Just to take a step back, a few weeks before you debut, Dusty Rhodes is in there for a taping, and he is the guest referee for JYD versus Butch Reed, which comes after a very confusing period of time where Butch Reed loses the North American title to Magnum TA on TV. JYD is the ref. Really does an awful job as the ref, but he keeps getting knocked down. He's just rolling around, and so it's a mess. And then that match happened because Butch Reed said he was going to wrestle whoever the fans picked. The fans picked the dog. He refused to wrestle the dog. He chose TA. TA wins the title. TA then loses the title at a house show to Nikolai Volkov. He's now the North American champion. Then we're notified that Mid-South President Charlie Lay has overturned both title changes, and Butch Reed is once again the champion, causing Nikolai Volkov to file a protest at the Russian embassy. Dusty Rhodes is brought in as the special guest referee to settle this between the dog and Butch Reed. The dog wins back the North American title. Dusty is then attacked by Nikolai Volkov, and he does maybe the most passionate interview of that era that he does, crying about the Russians and what Nikolai Volkov did, and he has the fans there in the palm of his hands. He even invents a word. At one point, he just goes, "Nikolai Volkov, you're not even in my repetenda!" But it works because it's Dusty, and he's crying, and there's spit on his chin.
Yeah.
Now, around this period of time, what we do know is that Bill Watts knew he wasn't going to go much further with Ernie Laddis' booker. He knew he needed a change. All of a sudden, Dusty's in there. We know around this period of time, Dusty's already talking to Crockett because Starrcade's already being planned.
Right.
Dusty's already making his moves for 1984, where he would become the booker in Mid-Atlantic. Fast forward a few weeks. Watts goes to Memphis, sees some talent, works on this deal with Jerry Jarrett to get all the guys that were at that time in some ways excess guys in a territory with too many guys. Some of them who have fallen out of political favor, like Bill Dundee, because Lawler got some power back.
Right.
You guys go to this TV taping, and on the same episode, I got my notes here, on the same episode you debut, Ted DiBiase sends in a promo from Georgia announcing he's been in Japan for the last few months and he's coming back for Jim Duggan. Ted DiBiase does not come back. He does not come back until, the fall of 84.
Yeah.
But obviously something was in motion there. They were thinking they were going to bring DiBiase back. Also, and this is where I wonder, when did he know Bill Dundee was going to be his booker? And when did he make the change here? On the episode where you debut, there's a promo. Reeser Bowden interviews Mr. Wrestling 2, Magnum TA, and Lanny Poffo. And 2 weeks before this, we had it laid out to us that Mr. Wrestling 2 is now the coach of Magnum TA. They teamed up the week before. Here this week, this promo. In the middle of the promo, Wrestling 2, everyone's smiling, everyone's getting along. He just goes, "Now, Lanny, you don't come from a good family." And he starts running down the Poffos while Lanny's standing there. And then Lanny says, "I'm my own man. I want you to judge me based on me," or whatever he says. And then we get a tag match. And the tag match is Magnum TA and Lanny Poffo versus Doug Vines and King Carl Fergie. During this match, Bill Watts is just going into detail about the Poffo family, about Angelo Poffo and the Macho Man Randy Savage. He's talking a lot about him. The next week on TV, same thing happens. During a Lanny Poffo match, a lot of talk about the Macho Man Randy Savage. 3 weeks out, or 2 weeks after this show, the third episode, this was edited off the WWE Network, which is interesting. TA and 2 are doing a promo about the situation where TA kind of likes Lanny Poffo. They team up. Wrestling 2 doesn't really like him and is trying to steer TA away from him. And he says, we have this footage, and it's footage of Randy Savage from Lexington, Kentucky, it says in the voiceover by Jim Ross. And it's like a little highlight video of some of his crazy moments, him and a snake and him throwing confetti.
It was off of the ICW TV program. The reason he said Lexington, Kentucky is because that's where they shot their television.
That's where their headquarters were, or living room, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But again, this is now 3 weeks in a row that Randy Savage is brought up on Mid-South TV. Now they're showing a highlight video with Jim Ross doing a voiceover, and it's tied into the whole TA and 2 angle, as it were, which is just beginning. Bill Dundee and Randy Savage at that point in time were not going to be able to work together.
No.
Every ICW guy, other than Randy Savage, had gotten back into mainstream wrestling through Mid-South Wrestling. Bob Orton, Bob Roop, Rip Rogers, George Weingroff, the Devil's Duo, now Lanny Poffo, One Man Gang even.
Ronnie Garvin was the only one that didn't.
Ronnie Garvin didn't either. That's right. He went right to Georgia for Ole.
Yeah.
Because Ole didn't care. He was going to hire whoever he wanted. Is it crazy to think that the original program was going to be TA and 2 versus Lanny Poffo and Randy Savage? And Dundee coming in as the booker? Because again, Randy Savage debuts in Memphis December 10th. So this is all in motion a few weeks before that.
Yes. But see, here's the thing. And see, here is why that some of this was stunning to me, because the first 2 TV tapings we did for Mid-South Wrestling were the day before Thanksgiving, 1983, and then 2 weeks later. We flew down, did the TVs, and came back. I didn't live there. I wasn't able to see the TVs as they aired, and it was not a situation. In that Irish McNeil Boys Club, there was a monitor in the dressing room, and Bill Watts's head was sitting in front of it, and you didn't go fucking peek over Bill Watts's fucking head to watch the show. You did your shit, right? So I didn't hear the announcements or the announcers. I didn't see the rest of the program, so I didn't know that these things were being talked about. But I can guarantee you that before I went to Louisiana to do that taping the night before Thanksgiving of 1983, they knew Bill Dundee was going to be the booker.
Was he there at the taping?
I don't believe he was at the TV that time. I'm trying to think. He was at the second one. He wasn't at the first one we made. No, he wasn't. Because he was still finishing up. He was at a top program in Memphis at the time. But I was told, the first thing I heard from Dennis Condrey was, because remember I've said that Watts, the only guy amongst the three of us he talked to was Dennis when he was in Memphis. I never met him. I knew he was there, and I stayed away. That was for this ridiculous handshake thing, and I wasn't going to go fucking getting and interrupting important people. But then several days later at a spot show, Dennis Condrey came in the locker room, in the heel locker room, and he said, "Hey, come here, I need to talk to you." Took me in the bathroom. I said, "What?" He said, "Bill Watts wants to bring you and me and Bobby in, me and Bobby as a team and you as our manager. He said, we're going to be his top heel tag team, and we're going to make between $50,000 and $100,000 a year apiece." And I looked at him. I said, I'm thinking to myself, why the fuck is Dennis ribbing me? What have I done to him? And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "What? Is this a rib, right?" "No." And Dennis could quickly make you realize when he was serious about something. He said, "No, I'm serious." He said, "Are you in for it?" I said, "Yes." "Okay." So Watts had talked to Dennis. Dennis told me, and it was a couple days afterwards because I was only working part-time at that point and I hadn't seen him, right? And he said the plane tickets are going to be coming. And it was less than a week later. That was the week before the TV taping. So this was not like a long planned out thing. The reason why he brought us in for 2 tapings, flew us down from Tennessee and back, was to get us on TV, winning a match every week for 5 weeks, including the Christmas break. We did 4 matches, and then they did a compilation thing. And we won matches every week and did an interview every week on TV for 5 weeks before the people ever saw us in the houses, that like you're supposed to. But I remember hearing from the start, knowing that Dundee was going to be the booker. So
did Watts know about the history between Savage and Dundee? And Watts, of course, someone who liked when wrestlers would fight in front of him.
Well, no, I'm thinking that probably he didn't know.
Because it's clear, because again, the first taping you're there, those 2 episodes with no Bill Dundee, Randy Savage is talked about all over those matches. The
and
third
actually,
week,
I don't know if Dundee was there for the second one or not. I don't know if Dundee was there for the second one or whether, because actually the night before Thanksgiving, we flew back on Thanksgiving and went to Dundee's house, and he had us over, him and Bev had us over for Thanksgiving dinner because we'd just come back, and of course Bobby was his son-in-law, but that's where I fucking first met Jamie Dundee, and that Christmas I ended up putting some of his Christmas toys together, the cute little tyke. But anyway, yeah, I think Dundee was finishing up commitments in Memphis. Ernie was because Ernie was definitely there. The first TV that we went, that's the first time I'd ever met or been close to Ernie in person, and my God, it was like the land of the giants, and you could hear it across the locker room when he cracked his fingers. He'd say his fingers were the size of goddamn John Holmes's dick, and he would, like you do, pop your fingers, only it would sound like somebody breaking broomsticks. And there was Nikolai Volkov and the Butch Reed and Junkyard Dog.
Tonga, the Barbarian before he found steroids. Tonga.
That's right. Tonga was the Barb, and Crusher Darso, and me and Bobby and Dennis are looking around going, my God, these are the biggest human beings we've ever seen. But we knew, we watched the matches and we said, okay, this actually, it ain't going to be hard because they're going to give us a push. That's the most important thing. Watts has said, I'm going to push you. And he said the deal was $50,000 a year if you don't get over, and $100,000 if you set records. And we set records. But he's going to give us a push, and with not to knock any of those guys because all of them were great talents, but everybody was similar. Everybody was doing the same stuff. It was all big guys doing big guy stuff. And especially we knew the rock and roll was coming. And we said, well, fuck. Once the people see this, it's different and it's exciting, and we're taking bumps, and we're, and the promos were the same thing. It's not that those guys couldn't cut promos. It's just that everybody was a big, huge guy yelling and screaming at each other. And the fans, even if they were hot at the heels, they didn't think they could whip one of those motherfuckers. Then I come out there, and I'm dressed in a fucking white jacket and red shirt and red pants and multicolored tie with a tennis racket and talking about my mama bought me some wrestlers. And they looked at me and said, we can kill him. And we instantly had more heat than everybody else just because it was different. And plus the Mid-South fans sized how much they were mad at the heels up by whether or not they thought they could beat them up physically. And so we had the most fucking heat.
You guys were also very unique because since the Samoans left in early 82, every tag team was 2 singles guys put together as a team.
That's true.
And you guys came in as a unit. You were unique because they had already had Akbar in there for a long time, and Akbar's great in Mid-South. Gary Hart was there for a cup of coffee, and then he disappeared.
And even though I kind of got Gary Hart's gimmick, the similarities ended there in our presentation.
Yeah, I mean,
because Gary would cut you, and people could see that.
It was so unique, just the idea that when Jim Ross, who was the ring announcer that first taping, introduces you, or that first television show, he introduces you, and you get on the mic, and you do the introduction. That itself stood out. Also, JYD had music. At various points, Carl Cox had music, different baby faces. You guys were a heel team.
When Murdoch was a babyface, they'd play the Marine Corps.
That's right.
Fucking hymn for him to come out. Yeah.
Do you remember what Carl Cox's music was?
I can't remember.
Here Comes the Judge.
That's right. And when he was a gimmick babyface.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Babyfaces had music back then, the top babyfaces. But heels didn't usually. And that was another thing that was different. And people now today look, oh my God, he took the microphone and introduced his team. How shocking. But at that period of time, the ring announcer made the introductions and their manager, so-and-so, and that was it. No, I snatch it away. You can't properly introduce. It was Watts' idea. He said, take the microphone away. Said, I'm the only one that can properly introduce my men. And I just kept doing that, and that became a thing. And if nobody else did it till then.
It was also the first time, I mean, it's a minor thing, but from a production standpoint, I believe it's the first time during an introduction they used the side camera. Usually it was the front camera where you see everyone in the bleachers in the Irish Menial Boys Club. When you got on the mic, you were facing the side. So they showed that angle, which is more of a close-up of you.
Yeah.
So it really stood out. But again,
on that big, expensive 2-camera shoot that we were doing. Hard camera and side camera on the side got the close-ups.
But to tie it back to Randy Savage, I'm pretty sure the plan was TA and 2 versus Lanny Poffo and Randy Savage, with Lanny turning heel. With Angelo Poffo, based on how much they were talking about Angelo Poffo, him there as the manager of the team.
And that may have been, and see, I guess once again, we'll never know, and even the principals that are still around at this time, I guarantee you don't remember, because it wasn't as important to them and the time as it is to us looking back, us nerds and historians. But if Watts was phasing Ernie out as Booker, and Watts was not only not shy, but not incapable of taking his own book and doing what he wanted to do and then putting somebody else in that spot to hand it off to, Dusty was in and out of Louisiana because he was over in the Superdome. He was over in that territory, and Watts would bring him in and bring Andre in. He may have been talking to Dusty, and Dusty probably wanted to go to Crockett because he'd seen the fucking potential, and Crockett had already, taken the Starrcade idea. And when Watts went to talk to Jarrett in Memphis, from a couple of different aspects of that conversation, talking to Dundee, talking to Jarrett, everybody, I've heard that at first it was like, I'm just looking for talent, whatever, I want to see what's going on. And he was intending more to talk to Jarrett about just his business in general. And that's when Jarrett said, and this came from Bill Dundee too, who ought to be your booker? Well, now I'm doing Dundee's accent with Jarrett, but Jarrett said, who ought to be your booker is that little son of a bitch sitting in the corner, because he's new and he knows these guys and he's got a million finishes and he works his ass off. And even if Watts had already picked some of the talent before he picked Dundee, it didn't take too long. So possibly Watts was going to start that, and he was thinking that when Dundee finishes in the Memphis territory and after the Christmas break comes down here and starts and I do know that Dundee flew down and spent a week with Watts going over stuff sometime in December. So at that point, if Randy Savage's name came up and Dundee's the new booker, then that's where that got shut down right there.
He debuts on Memphis TV, I believe, December 10th. I always heard, Jerry Jarrett's talked about the phone call he got from Angelo and talking to Randy and realizing everything will work out. I had heard, I think, Bill Watts say that he called Jerry Jarrett and put in a word for Randy Savage. And it makes me wonder, did he have to call Randy Savage up and say, look, the deal we had for you to come in, I can't do it because you have a problem with my booker. I know you don't have too many other places to go. I'll call up Jerry Jarrett and I'll let him know that you've been honorable and you're dealing with me.
And see if we can smooth it over, because now that Dundee's gone, you can go in and do the thing with Lawler and that you've been promoting for 5 years, which they did and did huge business. And boy, they did better business with Lawler in Memphis than they probably would have in Louisiana, because they've been plugging that thing for 5 years. And I pretty much guarantee you that we did better business with 2 and TA than Randy and Lanny probably would have.
But it's interesting thinking about the alternate universe where the Midnight Express are there because that was already in motion. But Ted DiBiase returns at the beginning of 84. They already are advertising the next one from Memphis, Terry Taylor coming in. And Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo as a heel team in Mid-South. I mean, it's fascinating to think about what if. You know, everyone always
But it would have been doomed in Mid-South. And people are saying, oh, yeah, now you're knocking Randy Savage. They had already put Lanny on TV as an underneath babyface. I don't care whether he turned or whatever. It wouldn't have been Randy Savage would have got over because if he came in cold and was Randy Savage, holy shit, look at that. But they'd already exposed Lanny as a underneath. As a matter of fact, Lanny's one of the guys that we beat in job matches every night for the first 2 or 3 weeks we were there to get our wins.
Well, that's one of the big switches. You know, Lanny Poffo comes in and he gets a nice little push with wins on TV, and they even do a video building up him coming in. Then all of a sudden there's this match or this promo with TA and 2 where they say they're going to put TA and him together, and Wrestling 2 just says this guy's family is a nightmare. And now it's all about Lanny denouncing his family. I think the line was, I was drafted into the Poffos. I didn't choose to be there, or whatever he said. So, you know, you think that maybe eventually he ends up teaming with his brother and doing that, but within a few weeks of Dundee coming in, Lanny's doing jobs to the Midnight Express on TV.
Well, there you go.
Coco Ware's in there for your second taping as a job guy. What was that?
In all honesty, not only the first taping, and the reason you saw Fergie, the first TV, actually, I forgot about this. The first taping we were at, Dundee wasn't there. Lawler and Jarrett themselves were there. Now that I think about it, because Lawler worked on TV.
No, he worked on the second taping, not the first one.
Okay, the second. Okay, well then the first. Oh goddamn! Point is one of those two tapings, Jarrett and Lawler were at. I bet you that Coco was there because Lawler was there, because I bet you they drove rather than fly. I bet you Coco drove. It's not unusual when two heads of territories, promoters, were going to do business, that they would come and visit the other TVs or whatever. And a lot of times, you know, they would say, hey, and send down, you know, 3 or 4 of your guys and I'll give them a payoff to do the TV taping or whatever. It didn't mean he was going to bring Coco in. And it didn't matter whether Coco did a job on Mid-South TV or not to them in Memphis, because nobody in Memphis was seeing it. So Fergie was there. Coco came down for once, probably, like I said, the one that Lawler was at. And they just, well, as you recall, we talked about Mike Jackson, the guys that he would bring to Atlanta TV as job guys, some that he broke in and trained. They were on a bunch of those Mid-South TVs because instead of leaving fucking Birmingham and going to Atlanta, they'd leave Birmingham, drive over to Shreveport. So, and they'd all get together in the car. So that happened a lot. That didn't really mean anything.
All right, well, let's get a few listener questions here on the show this week.
We're not done yet?
No, but this has been good. There's a lot of good wrestling history stuff here. Speaking of wrestling history, our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jeremy in Minneapolis. Dear CornyDriveThru, the WWE recently released their list of the top 50 women's wrestlers in history, which the women on the roster took very seriously. Have you seen this list, Jim?
I saw that they had a list. I did not peruse the actual list, but I saw the headlines that here's a list. And I bet you that, yeah, I would say, I'm about to say the boys, but I bet you the girls are taking it seriously.
The oldest women on the list were Luna Vachon, Alundra Blaze, and Bull Nakano. All women before them were completely forgotten, including Mae Young, the Fabulous Moolah, Sherry Martel, Wendy Richter, Leilani Kai, Aja Khan.
Wait a minute, hold on. Sherry Martel is not even in a WWF-sponsored list of the top women in wrestling?
Neither is Mildred Burke or the Jumping Bomb Angels.
Well, I can see Mildred Burke because, you know, it's actual history. People would have to be knowledgeable and learn things. But Sherry Martel?
Apparently not. I have the list here. Oh. Any guesses on the top 5 WWE women's wrestlers in history? Actually,
I don't know.
The firm name The 50 greatest women superstars.
50 greatest women superstars in all of history. I don't know what they would do. I don't know what they would say. So just tell me.
Who do you think would be number one? If you had to guess, based on the standards that none of those people who were part of the history before 1994 are included.
Sable.
No, Sable is number 16 on the list.
Oh, good Lord.
Number 1, Trish Stratus.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't say there's anything wrong with Trish Stratus. Is she the greatest of all time? I don't know, but it's not insulting.
Who would you find insulting to be on this list?
Maki Ito?
Well, she never wrestled for WWE, so you can't really.
Okay, well, neither did Mildred Burke. Who? I'm trying to think. I mean, the really insulting talent that they have employed. I'm not thinking of any females at the time. Like instantly, we could laugh at Great Khali going in the Hall of Fame because people in India watch YouTube, but he's laughable. But who are their laughable women?
Well, here are the top 10. I'll give you.
10
to 1. Obviously, Trish Stratus is 1, so you know where we're going to go. Number 10, Bayley. Number 9, Ronda Rousey. What were we going to say?
I was just because already we're in the top 10 of all time, and Bayley's already there.
Number 9, Ronda Rousey. Number 8, Lita. Number 7, Alundra Blaze. It's so weird still not seeing her as Medusa.
Can't they just give up on that now? Because nobody thinks of her as Alundra Blaze.
Did anyone ever go up to her and just go, excuse me, Alundra? It's such a weird
the same
name.
People that go down to the box office and buy their sports entertainment tickets.
Number 6, Sasha Banks.
Okay, half the people in the top 10 greatest female wrestlers of all time are currently on the roster.
Number 5, Asuka. Number 4, China.
Oh, for God's sake. Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot about the embarrassingly laughable women in WWE. I should have thought about China.
Number 3, Becky Lynch. And number 2, Charlotte Flair. And of course, number 1, Trish Stratus.
So, besides the fact that they shoehorned the 8th chin of the world into that list.
What? Oh, China? Oh, come on.
8th chin of the world.
Oh, I've never heard that before. That's awful.
That's because I just said it. It's like all of they're watching their TV now. So these must be the, 6 of these 10 top greatest women in history all work for us now. Amazing. Where is Sherry Martel's not on the list? Anywhere.
I'm looking. Let me go all the way to the end. Number 50 is Toni Storm. Looking down the list, I don't see Sherry Martel.
Or to Wendy Richter?
No Wendy Richter.
No Wendy Richter. I can understand they're mad, but why would they be mad at Sherry?
I don't know. I mean, do they not consider her? Are they thinking of her more as a manager? I mean, doesn't like the person
female
said.
Superstar, and she was a wrestler before she became
true.
A manager.
That is true, and she was a world champion there. I mean, why is Rockin' Robin not on this list? Considering some of the people here,
and especially Rousey, she did make a big stir in a short period of time, but it wasn't exactly a lengthy pro career in wrestling for Ronda Rousey.
Number 23, Stephanie McMahon.
Oh, for God's all right.
Number 16, Sable. I said that one already. Who's that?
That's me.
All right. Well, I hope we answered your question about the 50 greatest women superstars. Let's get another question. This one, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com.
Where's Sonny on that list, by the way? If Sable's on it.
I did not see Sonny on the list.
So, boy, they still must hold a grudge there, too.
Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Tyler. I've always been a big fan of Edge, so with WrestleMania coming up and the storyline tracking towards him winning the WWE title to cap his comeback, I look back on his career since becoming a main eventer. The guy has 11 world title reigns, and not a single one of them is a signature clean world title win. All of them are either gimmick matches and or featuring interference. Do you think this diminishes Edge in any way, or because he was a heel for almost all of those wins, does it make it okay? He's won more titles than anyone, He's won more. Yeah, that is what it says. He's won more titles than anyone, but it feels like the one thing Edge is missing from his career is that one clean world title win. And Jim, I don't know if you've noticed, but you didn't watch that main event for Fastlane that I told you was great.
Yeah.
Coming out of that match, Vince McMahon apparently made the decision that WrestleMania's main event has switched from Edge versus Roman Reigns to Edge versus Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan.
So if Edge wins, he'll still get screwed up in a fucking mixture of. But here's the in response to the question: if they did a package and went back and said, "Hey, fans, look at every time that Edge has won a championship, here's what happened," and just showed him constantly lucking into it, being a heel and screwing somebody, getting it in some quirky fashion, and not actually beating anybody, then yeah, it would hurt him. But right now, the only people, and I say this with all due respect to the questioner, he is correct in his assumption that it's been a shitty way to put any kind of titles on anybody, and that's why nobody remembers when Edge won the big one, because he never actually won the big one. It was a bunch of little ones. But nobody now that matters, except the people that are already watching anyway, the dedicated people like this questioner that knew that off the top of their head, nobody's going to fucking remember it. Nobody's going to know it. Edge has been off TV for several years because he had to retire because of a premature career-ending injury, and everybody was upset as he was because they liked Edge. And now he's back, and they're willing to. He's got goodwill, and they're not thinking in that term. Now, is the reason why that Edge was never, with all of his talent, and I love Edge, and I'm not knocking him, but is there a reason why he was never on the level of a top guy like an Austin or a Rock or a Taker or whatever? Because he, instead of ever winning a big one, he had all those shitty little pissy wins, whether he was a heel or not. Possibly. Now you might be onto something. Because doing bad finishes or finishes that don't really get a guy over, or the more storyline finish stuff that the modern writers think is what the bookers used to do disputed finishes to lead to rematches, even though it's totally unlike it because you're fucking people constantly. Anyway, it doesn't hurt now because the fans ain't going to remember, as I said, unless you went back and showed it to them. And then they'd go, oh, yeah, you're right. But right now they're glad to see him back. But is the reason why that he was not the tippy top guy before he had to retire because they did a bunch of shitty finishes with him? Possibly. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. The subject line in the email was Edge's legacy. What do you think his legacy is?
Well, I mean, I don't want to fucking, give the eulogy on this poor guy. I think he was a great talent. He got over at a time when people were still thankfully watching the business. I think that, the TLC matches I could have done without, but I was a fan of his as a worker since first time I saw him when he was Adam Copeland having the tryout match with Christian. And I've said that. He's a great worker. He's a different looking guy. He was a good looking athlete. I loved the Brood shit. I loved his trench coat. I loved his long rock star hair. He could fucking go and he could talk. He was a top guy, but I think he actually could have been more of a top singles guy, which is what I would have done from the time I first saw him. I thought this guy is a modern looking Ric Flair type, pretty boy, chicken shit, heel. I don't even say chicken shit, but he could take the bumps and he could beg off, and then he could be on offense and he could be vicious, and he had facial expressions and he could work and he had the body. I was sold on the first time I saw him to use him as a top heel and figure in 3 to 5 years, this guy's going to be one of the top single heels in the company. And that's what I would have done had it been me. But the Brood was good, and everything, like the vampires were hot at that point, so that was fine. But I would have done more with him as a single and pointed him in that direction as a start.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from TJ. For all the people in wrestling that Jim dislikes with his whole heart, the Omegas, the Russos, etc., why doesn't he dislike Vince McMahon just as much as them for being the root that allowed them and their type to exist in pro wrestling? And I will say, I do hear this every now and then from people who say, well, Jim doesn't like this person or that person. Why does he still give Vince any credit or still talk about Vince in a glowing way?
Part of it is Vince's supernatural Jedi mind control shit that he could do, and you've heard every top wrestler say this, and I've said this. They will walk in a room with Vince McMahon, or they will get on the phone with Vince McMahon, and by the time that they come out or get off of it, they will have completely changed their mind about whatever it was and will agree with Vince McMahon, including me. He's done it. And I don't know how the fuck he does it. That was when he was younger and a little bit more vibrant. But also, it's a couple of things. You have to respect the guy. Even if and I was really pissed off at all the things he'd done to wrestling in the 80s and admitting to the commission it was a work and et cetera, et cetera. Then in the 90s, when it was more personal between me and WCW, the enemy of my enemy became my friend. After being around him, he's got charisma. He's got personality. If you get to hang around him, especially if you don't have to work constantly, you like the fucking guy, and you're capable of having laughs, right? And he will do ridiculously nice things for you. And I'll say this, I don't even know if I've told this story before, but after the previous stories I've told on this program, it's probably not a surprise that when I moved up there to Connecticut in 1996 after the Smoky Mountain adventure, my credit was not what it has been for most of my life. It wasn't anything to write home about. And trying to find houses to rent up there in that fucking part of the country for any amount of money that you could afford. Actually, even if you couldn't afford it, just find a house find a house in Connecticut anywhere near Stamford with central air conditioning. They live like savages up there. Well, it's only hot 4 months out of the year. Oh, okay. So I only have to fucking walk across fucking broken glass 4 months out of the year. Why buy shoes? Anyway, find one, much less one you can afford. It was tough. And I was in the apartment in Stamford that they had provided for me and that they were paying for. It was on the 20th floor of one of those buildings downtown. You had to go through a goddamn the lock to get in the garage, and then a lock to get in the elevator, and then another elevator with a lock to get up to your floor, and then 3 locks on the door. And my God, I was going out of my mind. Can't live in a city. And I mentioned one day, well, I can't find a house. I found this one, but this woman, my credit's shot, so she don't. He said, well, pal, just pay her the rent up front. What? Just pay her a year's rent up front. Like, I can't do that. He said, call the office. He advanced me $25,000 on my salary that year to pay the fucking year's rent on the house in advance so that I could have the house. Well, that was awful nice. But then again, he'll turn around but once he's finished with you, he might raise the rent on your fucking house or kick you out. So he'll do nice things for you and then he'll drive you crazy. But you have to, at some point, respect the fact that at one point in his life, I don't know about now, but at many points in his life, he knew how to make stars and he knew how to promote shit. Even if the wrestling suffered, he was a great promoter and he knew how to get stars over and make them seem bigger than life. And I can honestly say that he would have just hauled off and kicked me in the balls and fired me if I'd ever suggested that we should put the Invisible Man on television. He might have drug tested me first before he fired me. He wouldn't have done all that stupid, silly bullshit, at least back then. And even now, he doesn't do, it's just bad shit, but it's not just childish silliness.
Well.
So, So
some of it is.
Well, I don't know, but and that's I don't know that, Vince. But I was working for a guy that he may not have taken care of the secrets of the wrestling business, or at least of whether it was a work or not. But he didn't just hire mud show invalids and just put out shit, weekly on television. I don't know what the fuck's going on now. Anyway, so I have to have some. But I've said many times also, the whole goddamn business would have been a whole lot better off if it had never expanded nationally, if Vince had not done the things he had done. His business prospered. Everybody else's business went to shit, and it still is. And he's made it now so that nobody else can compete with him. And the one chance we got of a guy funded enough and had the connections turned out to be a circle jerk with all their fucking friends. So it's hard to fucking just knock Vince as a complete imbecile.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. In a recent interview, Paul White said the segment he had with Randy Orton on the Legends Night episode of Raw was the reason he was done with WWE. The quote here is, "It's just they talk so much about legends, but anytime they are around, they get run into the ground." What are your thoughts on White's take on the WWE and their use of legends?
Well, remember, didn't we, in the review of that particular night of business, Orton was brutal to Mark Henry, who got absolutely no comeback or whatever, but we mentioned that what the fuck? Why are they just browbeating and emasculating these guys on Legends Night? But we commented on it when we talked about that. It was strong enough. They make guys, just emasculate them and make them look like shit. And I guess he just didn't like it and said, well, I can do something else. I don't blame him. Because I've never understood every time that I have brought back a legend in wrestling in whatever venue, whether it be Smoky Mountain Wrestling, whether it be Ohio Valley Wrestling, whether it be Ring of Honor, and promoted them and presented them as a big deal, it always drew, it always sold, it always got interest. People always liked the segments, whatever they were. And my biggest ever Smoky Mountain Wrestling events and biggest ever OVW events were built around, in large part, a legend, either a legend ceremony or a legend featured on the event, or bringing back a big name from the past to wrestle or just to be there. And so I don't know why they go the complete opposite way. They have something, it's almost foolproof, that these guys are worth money, and then they bring them back and they either throw them out in a clump so it's meaningless, or they emasculate them once they get there, or they give them nothing to do, and that's just stupid. Wrestling legends stay over longer than anybody, or traditionally have. They're not making any more wrestling legends now. Which one of these guys on TV right now you think is going to be over in 30 years?
30 years? Oh, boy.
Yeah, if anybody even remembers any of them. None of them.
In 30 years, what's TV?
Yeah, well, in 30 years, what's wrestling is honestly is the problem. That's where we're headed. Because right now there's people that sometimes have, what's roller derby? So I don't know what their issue is, but you protect your legends because they're your fucking money in the bank. You can open that bank vault if you don't do it too often, and you can bring out gold every time with a wrestling legend. And depending on the part of the country, you can go way back. I mean, for God's sake, in the Carolinas and Memphis, there's people that actually remember wrestlers that died before they were born because it was such a part of the fucking culture. And they don't know who the WWF champion is today.
Well, Jim, a question that several people have sent in over the last few days, I'll give a version of it. Any thoughts about the news that Brian Armstrong, the Road Dogg, recently suffered a heart attack?
Yeah, I hate to hear that. And I know people have pointed out he said this on Twitter, right wing that, or people were mad at him because he was defending the WWE programming or whatever. But and I got to be honest, you know, I hate that anybody that I've always loved and respected and the whole family, I hate to hear any of them are Republicans, but we will suspend that right now and hope that he's feeling better and doing better. And you know, that was the thing. Brad, was it October 2012? Brad died of a heart attack. It apparently doesn't run in the family. You know, Bullet was 80 last year when he passed away, and that was cancer. And, you know, the other members of the family. So hopefully it's something that's, you know, not a big major deal. And I've heard people have heart attacks and then nip up and they're good for a long time. And I'm not saying he's like critical right now or whatever. They said they were doing tests, so it doesn't sound like, you know, he's in intensive care or whatever. But anyway, I wish he'd lose some weight. I've seen pictures. Here's the goddamn thing. And I'm not lecturing anybody, but all my career, people have said, Cornette, you're fat ass, because I've been fairly plump for a lot of my adult life, right? But for whatever reason, I've never worked out a day in my life, and I've never been athletic, and I weigh the same thing now as I weighed 40 years ago. Whereas everybody that looks great, or that looked great when they were in the business, they get out of the business and they become 300 pounds. I don't know but anyway, I saw a picture and I seriously wish and Arn, same thing. Arn's getting big too. We're not as young as we used to be, boys. But I hope Brian's doing better, and I wish him the best and the whole family. You know, the Armstrongs have always meant a lot to me from Bob on down, and they've done a lot for me. And so I hate to hear that, even if he's working for the evil empire these days and doing the bad wrestling.
I got to meet him in 95 when he worked for you. He was there in Knoxville and Johnson City. I don't remember if he was there any other nights, but was a really nice guy. Really, really, really nice guy. He was very interested in any tapes of his dad. When I mentioned I had some footage of his dad from the 70s, he flipped out. He's like, oh, yeah. Here's my phone number. Here's my address. You know, get in touch.
Well, you know, when he first, because Brian first started, nobody flew in those days in Smoky Mountain in the territories. The Armstrong family still lived in Pensacola, but Bullet, when he was booked, he would come up and he'd bring some of the family just to ride with him, and I'd book whoever was available. And then, of course, Scott and Steve had runs and et cetera, where they were wrestling all the time. But so the first few times that Brian wrestled for us, he wasn't in the business yet. He had just ridden up to be in the car with his dad. And we said, hey, we realized they had Brad's old, what was he, Arachnoman? It was the ripoff of Spider-Man in WCW.
That's right.
So
was Arachnoman, what am I thinking? Bad Street was the Arachnoman outfit turned inside out, right?
Well, that's what I was about to say. Because when Brad became Bad Street, who was the masked Freebird, they turned the Arachnoman outfit inside out. Well, they still had that. And when Brian rode up with Bob, because Bob didn't work a full schedule, he just made the TVs and the big shows. Or if we'd have several days in a row, he'd make some spot shows if they were in the middle. But so he rode up, and they brought the Arachnoman outfit, and we turned it inside out and made him the Dark Secret. And as a matter of fact, the year before, I'd just gotten the St. Louis programs that Pat O'Connor had sold to, or had left to his wife, and she had given to Harry White to sell to me. And they had two Dark Secrets. One was, I think, at one time was Joe Pazandak in the 40s, but then Dr. Bill Miller was a Dark Secret at one point. I just liked the name The Dark Secret for a masked guy. And he was a heel, so we couldn't obviously say he was a member of the Armstrong family, and also he wasn't technically in the wrestling business yet. He just worked out with his brothers, I guess, and I don't know. Maybe he'd wrestled some in Outlaw Show down in the Gulf, but we turned the Arachnoman outfit inside out, made him the Dark Secret, and he did jobs on Smoky Mountain Television. So the Road Dogg, that was in That was in 1994, I guess.
No, it was before then.
Was he? Or it could have been earlier than 93.
He was the Dark Secret, I think.
No, wait, because the
late
first
92, early 93.
When he was the roadie, it was 93 with Jeff, right? So okay,
no,
it was
a little bit after that too.
But it was 92, some of the first Smoky Mountain TVs, and then he came back and worked as himself after he'd been the roadie and road dog and everything on the shows you were talking about where you met him. He had left because that's when Jeff was on the outs with him, and he just came up and worked those shows.
You know, he had the full bodysuit as the Dark Secret, and eventually as the road dog, he had a lot of things covered up because he was a trendsetter in terms of having really bad tattoos.
A lot of, yeah.
In wrestling that you had to cover up. Yeah.
And not anything offensive, just not the most artistic work. And also, and let's face it, we've talked about, and he would not even be upset if he heard me saying this. We've talked about that all of the Armstrong sons got some quality of bullets, but not any one of them particularly got everything. So Brad was the worker. Scott may be more the business and the booking mind. Steve was the raw athlete. Brian got the promo, but he didn't get the fucking body genetics, right? So he always wore a bodysuit because look at how incredible Brad looked. And Steve really looked good. And Scott was lighter, but in his day, he was really in shape. Brian was the biggest in terms of the tallest and the heaviest naturally, but he didn't have the fucking genetics there and probably was not dedicated to the gym, but he got the promo. So he ended up really making more money than all the rest of them.
He also got height. He got the height.
And he got the height.
That's right. Well, we certainly wish that he feels better and gets out of the hospital soon.
And, you know, that's the thing is, you never know. They have everybody checked out and tested with their testing program and their medical program, but that's the active talent. I think as many legends that are getting up there in age as they've got working in office or, you know, producer positions or whatever, maybe they ought to put those guys on through more of medical testing. But I hope Brian's doing good. I really do, even if he is a Republican.
Well, Jim, our final question this week, sent on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from I Love Baby Girl Liv Morgan.
I've seen this on Twitter.
You've seen this account?
I've seen this account on Twitter. Yes.
There's something I've always...
Love is L-U-V, right?
No, it's actually a full spelling. It's not like Prince is the one who set up this account.
Well, I think it's shorter on Twitter. Go ahead.
There's something I've always wanted to ask Jim. Did he despise Sable, or did he despise the idea of Sable? It could have been anyone that wrestled and Vince Russo fell in love with, or was it something specific that he just didn't like about Rena Mero?
Both. I didn't like the concept of her, and I didn't like the execution of her. Actually, I would have liked to see her execution. No, that's a Groucho Marx line. If she had been a young lady who gave off the aura that she knew that she was being pushed past her ability, that if she was humble and tried to learn the business and or cooperate with people and her co-workers and put as much effort into her performance as she did into going to the bank and cashing her check, if she came off like she knew and she was aware that other people who were more talented were helping her, then I would have liked the person and just not the concept of it. Because the concept of taking someone who's never been in the business, has no talent for any aspect of it, and sticking her in there purely because of her fucking appearance has been done before with guys. And that's why I've always called her the female Ultimate Warrior. Because if it's a nice person that for some reason because of their freakish look or outstanding athletic ability or some aspect or talent about them that even if they don't know anything about fucking wrestling, you can make money with them, you can sell tickets with them. That's acceptable if that person admits to their coworkers, I don't know what I'm doing, asks for help me, give me advice from somebody other than the person that's panting over them and writing their scripts. I'm talking about their coworkers in the locker room. Puts in an effort to justify their position by actually working hard at the physical aspect of it instead of complaining about it every time you're supposed to do something physical. That would have gone a lot longer way, but instead, the female Ultimate Warrior got the big head, believed her own publicity, thought that she was better than everybody else, didn't want to learn how to work, didn't want to learn how to help get the opponents over, didn't want to fucking do anything otherwise than go out there and be on TV and then become a movie star. So I didn't like the concept of Sable because it was these two post-adolescent men acting like prepubescent boys over this surgically enhanced silicone model that had no personality, no talent for the business, no charisma of any kind except to stand there with fake tatas hanging out for the, fucking horny audience that they were selling to at the time. Same reason I didn't like the Ultimate Warrior, because they pushed him to the moon even though he was the shits, and then he turned around and shit on everybody else and didn't thank anyone because he thought that he was doing it. She thought she was a big fucking star. Tell me the first time she ever cut a fucking promo that anybody could even listen to, much less remember. Tell me the great match she ever had. I was there when they changed Luna Vachon hitting her across the back of the head with the belt to shoving it into her kidneys in a light and fake fashion because she was afraid that Luna, the best worker on the female roster, was going to hurt her. Probably would have out of goddamn animosity because all the rest of the girls hated her too. It wasn't just limited to Sunny. I don't know about all the rest of them. But all the wrestling background girls couldn't stand her. Luna didn't like her. Sunny wanted to fucking set her on fire. And she was basically, she would fucking, that's why I called her an undercover cunt. Sunny was an out front cunt. She was a bitch to everybody. That was Sunny, and that's why she had personality and drew money. Sable was nice to Vince, the Vinces, and nice to everybody on creative and nice to all the important people, and then she didn't give a fuck about the wrestling business or anybody else in it, probably including her own husband, whose career she fucking finished off and wiped her feet on the way to trying to become a big movie celebrity. And then finally, then they wouldn't give her a contract equal to the men, and she wanted to become a movie star, so then she sued them for whatever. And then Vince McMahon was so taken with her, he brought her back again, and she did less the second time as she did the first time, because she was still the shits.
When did you hear that she got together with Brock? And what were your thoughts?
Oh, God, sometime in the mid-2000s. And I was like, what the fuck? And that's why I've always, to each his own, but Brock Lesnar, a guy who hates people, hates to socialize, hates to go anywhere, even worse than me, hates being around human beings, and the two people he wants most in his life are Sable and Paul Heyman. But anyway, yeah, that's it. No, I didn't like the concept of Sable because there were other girls there that could actually carry their weight and do things that were easier to work with, and I thought more attractive, because Sable was just that drone monotone Stepford wife voice, and the fact that she never cracked a smile, it didn't seem like, unless she was laughing at somebody's joke that she wanted to fucking give her a better job. She had no personality. She couldn't do anything except dress up in very little and show off her surgically enhanced fucking features. I wanted them to push some of the girls that actually were there to fucking work. And then also, because the two Vinces were so captivated by, I'm sorry, but, anybody who thinks that Sable was more attractive than fucking Sunny in any way, shape, or form, it's just ridiculous. So anyway, there you go.
Well, with that, the drive-thru is closed.
You tampon tunnel.
All right. And now I'm just hitting notes because I didn't end on the one I wanted to. Of course, you could hear more from the tampon tunnels of wrestling this Saturday on The Experience. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, we'll be back next week, right back here on Tuesday on the Drive Thru. You can follow Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcast. And want to make mention, if you enjoy learning about or talking about classic wrestling, consider joining Arcadian Vanguard's Kayfabe Memories message board, tinyurl.com/wrestling history forum. Join today. You can hear classic episodes of the Drive Thru and The Experience by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to almost 3 years of shows with episodes added each and every week. Patreon.com/Cornette. We just put up a couple great episodes. 1, Jim's conversation with the late, great Scott Williams. And 2, live in Charlotte, the live Jim Cornette experience, always chaotic. Check that out today. Patreon.com/Cornette. Subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. It'll be the first thing that pops up. Over 200,000 strong on our march to 1 million. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel with the exclusive and popular Travis Heckle artwork. Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com.
Stop it! Don't remind them.
That's the logo. That's the motto. Stop it. Don't remind them.
Remind them.
JimCornette.com.
Naturally say nothing.
The Drive-Thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until Saturday on The Experience, and next week on Tuesday, right back here on the Drive-Thru. For Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!